Before the adjournment, during the earlier debate, I was asked on a perfectly properly raised point of order to rule on whether the phrase "God willing" was unparliamentary. I ruled that it was, and I now wish to reverse that ruling. I was at that time concentrating on the complexities of the debate, and I had recalled on the question being put to me that a reference to God had indeed been ruled as unparliamentary on a previous occasion. That was, however, in a very different context and very different circumstances, which did not apply before lunch. I do not, on reflection, consider that an appropriate use of a common expression in language such as "God willing" to be either offensive or unparliamentary, and I withdraw that ruling. Very well. We now continue with the debate on P34, and next to speak is Deputy Gardner. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. It can't be just me having that deja vu feeling. Here we are again. We are down to almost 0 cases. Jersey is about to get back to some kind of normality after 5 months, and that is about to be leveraged for the benefit of tourism. And this is post-debate about the border policy. And I can expect the same businesses assure us that we'll not have a 3rd wave, and we will not import the new variants a day after Boris Johnson warned that UK to expect the 3rd wave, and the state of the presence and danger of new variants in the UK. We didn't actually close borders, so we don't need to open them. They've never been closed, and it's not a debate about opening the borders. The borders are open. What we did ask travelers to follow certain rules to keep islanders safe. This is a debate about the safe management of travel. Travel should and will continue. We are only debating what safety measures are necessary to protect our island. We hear it said that the situation is different now, and I agree. We now have previous experience of our past border failures, which would be good to reflect upon at this time. The follow sentence is one that I found in my July speech. Recent positive cases clearly reveal the infection risk come from travel into the island. It was in July last year. The same situation as we have today. We don't have any community transmission cases for 20+ days. And the cases that we had recently, they were all from inbound travel. I will have 3 parts to my speech after opening. The first part is facts. So what do we know? Twice, COVID was introduced to the island through arrivals. Quarantine works. 14 days incubation period, most of the cases can be discovered within 10 days, and this is the reason that we moved into the 10 days quarantine with 3 tests. During the incubation period, people spread the virus. To reach herd immunity, 70% of the population should be vaccinated or recovered. As per Monday, we had approximately 25–26% of the population of Jersey vaccinated with 2 doses. And I know that 1 dose gives a protection, but it's just about 50%, and the 2 doses give it 90%. In the UK, they vaccinated 10 million with 2 doses, which brings us to 15.7% of the UK population vaccinated. And these are the facts. COVID vaccines are highly effective, but none are 100%, meaning a small number of people might become infected after being fully vaccinated, but those infections are typically mild. We know this. There are 3 variants are present and still spreading in the UK. Brazilian, South African, and Indian double mutation. Europe is in its third wave. What we don't know, the risk that these variants pose for post-vaccinated people, especially elderly. We don't know how long vaccine is effective. Some studies suggest that we'll need a boost after 6 months. Just yesterday, we heard news about South African variant in Birmingham, and in that article was written very clearly, experts believe that South African variant may be able to get around some of the protection offered by our current vaccine, although they should be able to prevent severe illness. Again, it might, yes, it might no, we don't know. If all vaccines have a high efficacy against these new variants and prevent less serious illness and long COVID, this is one thing. If not, some of all or other vaccines, basically they use it at the present and they will not be helpful. Saying this are putting vaccines on the side, it's about, this is just things that big questions mark that we don't know. And this is the situation different now. We do have a vaccine, but we don't know how does it react to the variants. Now I'm going to the part 2 of my speech. And this is addressed, it's about communication, medical advice, and political decisions. Because what we're doing here today, let's face it, it's political decision. As the scrutiny panel, and I'm a member of the scrutiny review panel, we said, let's bring to the decision to the assembly. And if assembly will say 50 to 100,000 smaller region, this is the way we still want to go. This is the decision that we will make together. I would like to bring members' attention to 3 quotes from the STAC minutes. And please, 2 minutes listen time for it. 9th September 2020. The chain formed the cell that some politicians had queried whether it would be possible to recategorize amber areas as those that were where they had an excess of 50 cases over the previous 40 days rather than 25. The consultant in communicable disease control observed that the local controls appeared to be performing well when compared with the neighboring jurisdictions where the infections rate were increasing, and did not believe it would be helpful to make requested change at this junction. The chair stated that one outbreak of COVID-19 in Jersey, which was a small island, would have a significant impact where the large countries could more easily absorb the implication of the same. The situation didn't change. If we have a variant, a small island would have significant impact compared to the other jurisdictions. And it's from the 9th of September 20. Second quote from 16th of September 20. The consultant in communicable disease control suggested that the island had a choice between a proactive introduction of mitigation factors to keep the levels of the virus as low as possible, or allowing more COVID-19 to enter the island, which would itself cause restrictions. The consultant in communicable disease control agreed that the independent advisor, epidemiology and public health, that it would be inappropriate at the current time to change the definitions used to classify and respond regions, and it would be preferable to keep the state affairs in the UK and Europe under review accordingly. As we suspected at that time, and I remember briefings, and I remember questioning time, and I remember debates in these chambers, we've been told about medical advice, but now we see from the STAC views that the medical advice was changed by politicians despite the STAC views. While I'm being described as unscientific, because probably everybody remember, so the members remember that I bring in October proposition, and I've been described as unscientific and ill-informed in previously debate. Behind the scenes, the STAC advisor recommending the same thing that I was. And after this change again, STAC advice, we had community transmission event, which led to the disaster that we had all last Christmas. Maybe we forgot, but we did have 3 months of very, very difficult winter. 12th of October 2020, the Medical Officer of Health indicated that it was of no surprise that the cases were increasing. Ministers had made the decision sometime previously to recategorize green upwards from 25 to 50 to enable travel to continue. But the result had been the risk of more people with COVID-19 coming to the island. In her view, the sales advice to the minister should continue to be strongly in favor to taking necessary protection. And here the counter-argument, the panel about taking medical advice, competent, we basically saying, let's go, and I do agree with the minister. He said in the summer, minister said that in the summer, we did manage well, but then the summer we had 25 to 100,000. We didn't have 52, 100,000. And now I'm going to the part 3, economy, well-being and freedoms. The second where restrictions were more difficult for more people mentally and financially. We still don't have all our freedoms back on the island. The third way will be worse again. The biggest expense in this pandemic, and we received just recently figures for 2020, we still didn't see the figures for 2021, was the payroll support, which was half of 190 million that spent in 2021. We supported 1 in 3 private sector employees, and rightly so. We need help businesses to get through the pandemic. The large proportion of that money went to the hospitality industry, and if we need to give more support to hospitality, we should do it, as tourism might not pick up even with absolutely no restriction, because it's still pandemic out there. Yet again, we've been suggested that the island need to accept higher risk to support hospitality. Let's make it clear. What we are risking, further damaging education of our children, reducing freedoms of our residents, and preventing any group activities being enjoyed at all. Each wave of COVID in Jersey makes the damage caused to our society deeper and longer lasting. Let's be clear, even if we introduce bigger areas, we'll not lose all tourism. It will be less, but sure we'll have our community coming first, and will probably remain the tag being Jersey safe destination. It was interesting that during the staycation, and by the way, I would be enjoying staycation around Christmas, but it wasn't possible. During the staycation, Sark had the best season last summer compared to any other seasons, recent seasons before. Another point, and I agree with the minister, we all need to have connections to our families and to our loved ones. And we have 50% of the population that not from this island, originally were not born on the island, and I'm one of them. But from them, approximately 20-something% of the population, they're further from the UK. And the arrival from the UK, we are from Jersey, but we're still considered as the UK feels unsafe there. On the balance, if we can travel, we just need to take into account the possible isolation periods, and we can meet with the family when we're taking into account isolation period. Lowering the threshold for arrivals last year benefited only few businesses and was catalyst for the second wave. Clearly, the island as a whole, we did not benefit from the decision. Clearly, the island as a whole, we had bad disadvantage and impact. Another thing that we said, we have a contact trace and track and trace, and they're very good. They're doing a very good job. At the same time, to the answer to my written question for this city, it's clearly stated that when I asked how many people were identified through the contact trace on which and where they contracted the virus, it was stated that incubation period is for 14 days. Therefore, it's really rarely possible to be conclusive about where a person has contracted the virus, where it has been transmitted, as there are usually many interactions that take place that period of time. And the last point, we will have a public hearing, because what we're introducing now is basically saying, let's go back to the numbers that were before, the numbers that STAC supported, then bigger areas that worked previously, but we have other points. And it's, for example, where is the mitigations measures? If we are going to the high numbers, would the mitigation measure like how we treat people who are vaccinated or not vaccinated? And I know that it's a very difficult topic, but this is how we are thinking about vaccination. And one of the examples about, there is a jurisdiction that leading, they have almost 60% of the adults vaccinated with the 2 doses. And they're introducing 3 layers for arrival because it's clear for them, PCR test prior arrival, vaccination with 2 doses, with 2 shots, and the third is antibody tests on arrivals at the airport. Why they're doing this? Because it's clear that the inbound travel creates a higher risk for the economy and the society to have a stability and continue to operate. Is everything open now? And they will try to do the maximum to protect this. Coming back, we all want the best for Jersey, by the way. I do believe that all the Assembly wants the best way for Jersey, and we do have differences of opinion, and I would stand behind the decision that will be made by the Assembly. As the Assembly, 3 times we voted for higher risk approach, not me personally, and we are still coming out from the approach. We are in a good place now. We don't have community transmission for 20+ days, several uncertainties with variants and vaccinations. And thank you.
I have to stop you from speaking. Yeah. Thank you very much. Senator Moore.
Thank you, sir. I'm very pleased to follow the previous speaker. I think really there's very little for me to add, other than to reinforce the message that Deputy Gardner had there, which was that the Assembly would do well to listen to its critical friend, the scrutiny panels, and take heed of the work it has done. Deputy Gardner has done an excellent job of reminding members of some of the events of last year and some of the unfortunate and unavoidable and unfortunate and avoidable incidents, and particularly that of the circuit breaker over the Christmas period, which is a matter of great regret. Deputy Gardner also referred to the minutes of the stack that we are now able to see. Of course, we still have a time lag, and so, for example, it will not be possible for us to see what the current advice is from STAC, and that has been a matter that the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel has raised in our interim report into the COVID response, which I hope States members have read. So the issues of transparency have been with us on a number of occasions throughout this pandemic period, and it seems a shame that we don't learn from those lessons. Yes, sir, there have been a great deal of really good things about the island's response to the COVID pandemic, but sir, we would do well to listen to the scrutiny panel and their advice, which is backed up by evidence. So there may be issues with the timing, but that perhaps, sir, is a matter for the chair of that panel and the minister, who perhaps have had some difficulties in communicating with each other in the time period that has been available. We, sir, as panels have done our very best to often turn around our thoughts and to seek evidence and offer our advice in short order, and I would like to once again reiterate our thanks to all of the officers who've supported the scrutiny panels over the past difficult months, and we have I am very proud of the work that all of the panels have done in that regard. Just as a reminder, sir, I also recall very clearly the very short time period with which the Scrutiny Liaison Committee turned around amendments to P84, the original Safe Travel proposition. that, I think, is an excellent example of the opportunities that this Assembly had to listen to scrutiny, who had some constructive and sensible recommendations for the Assembly, things such as implementing an isolation for travellers until their first test result was received. And we all, of course, know that that was eventually implemented, although the Assembly voted against the Scrutiny Liaison Committee's recommendation at that time. And it was, of course, that experience that led to the creation of this Safer Travel Guidelines panel, because we saw the importance of maintaining a watching brief over this very important issue. And I don't need to go again across all of the excellent points that Deputy Gardner has already raised. So, Sir, of course we want to open up our island and showcase what wonderful place we have to share with travellers to it. But in order to do that, what we really need to offer people is clarity and also safety and security, which is what many travellers will. Even now we are seeing excellent levels of vaccination. People are seeking those different factors in their travel making decisions. And so let's be proud to offer that additional amount of reassurance and safety and security. And let's also protect our own community and our own economy, so that we don't have to endure severe restrictions as we had to over the Christmas period, which was, it has to be said, entirely self-inflicted. So just in closing, I would also like to note that according to the Government of the United Kingdom's website, their COVID infection rate as of yesterday for the whole country was 25.2. Therefore, what I consider to be very sensible recommendations of the Safer Travel Guidelines panel should not inhibit a great deal of travel between the United Kingdom and the island, but it will offer us the benefit of greater reassurance and security for both islanders and our internal economy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Senator. Deputy Martin.
Thank you, sir. And I'll start with the word of the Senator, who says the islanders need clarity. They had clarity up until last Friday. They were told on the 19th of March when we would amend the border travel, and that would be the 26th of April. The Senator also said, so it's always based on evidence scrutiny. But when the Health Minister summed up, he was being asked for clarification by the chair of the panel. Is it 1,000 a day? Is it 1,000 a week? Well, I would have thought they should have known all these numbers. And if they're saying there's some difficulty getting hold of the Health Minister, you should have pinned him down, and you should have pinned down Stack, and you should have had a good discussion on this. And if you still felt you wanted to bring this, absolute right to do it, and absolute, if it had to be late, it would be late, no problem. But so what have we got today, sir? We have asked the islanders over Christmas and the New Year to work with our rules, and didn't they do fantastically? They did a fantastic job. We now know we've got a few cases. And I also say that in the, it was in the July debate, and Deputy Pershard put out her stall and said, some of us have a higher or lower risk aversion. Some of us do, but we are governing for people of the island. And the people of the island have been making plans. I'll just read this part of the comments, sir, that has come from the Health Minister. It says, we conservatively estimate that at least half of islanders with travel bookings over the next 3 weeks period would be adversely affected. Many hundreds of islanders will be faced with a difficult choice of whether to cancel. No, they won't be faced with a difficult choice, sir, because in the real world, and if you've got a public facing job when you come back and you're taking 2 children away, you can't isolate for 5 days. You come back on a Sunday, that's day 0. Day 1 is Monday, your first day, and your day 5 test is a Friday. So they've got to get permission for an extra week's holiday, and they've also got to keep their children off of school and all isolate at home. Not good for any of those type of families. I've always called the isolation you've been doing abroad, it's a rich man or, you know, very privileged people who work for themselves, who get paid every month. Well, sounds a bit like us, doesn't it, sir? Works well for us, sir. But it's not about us. These workers, and we know we've got to a point with the vaccinations, we've got to a point where we're so low, they will be tested when they go away. It's not go away, but when they come back, we know they will be tested. They will have to wait indoors until they get their first test through. And to keep the people with us, sir, and this is the Chief Minister's word, it has to be proportionate to the infection that is here today. Deputy Gardner was quoting the STAC minutes of September the 9th of last year. I'm hoping the panel is going to tell me they sat down with STAC. I know Deputy Gardner's on the panel and Deputy Ward is on the panel and he's spoken, so but anyone else, I want them to tell me they sat down with STAC before they lodged this. There are people, they've got the early bank holiday made, they've got Liberation Day, yes it's a Sunday, but some people may have already thought, well, I'll take Liberation Day, I'll take the Monday, and it's already booked because again the real world workers had to book their holidays in November and December. Their companies make them do it. And then they go, oh, good news, we can travel, we can go and see Nan, we can go and see our younger kids at uni, we can see our children, and one of them settled in the UK with our grandchildren, great, but we've got to come back to work. And if you've got to come back to work, it's not going to be a difficult choice if this is passed today, there's no choice. You'll put everybody else's rota out because the holiday rota's there. We've got half term at the end of May. And that's what people look to take their children away, especially to see relatives. I just don't think, you know, there's been enough thought put into this. The Health Minister's comments, the Health Minister's speech is all about being, yes, we know we don't want a second wave, but we are vaccinated. We were waiting for a miracle. The miracle came. It was a vaccination. We started in December. Most of the people have been, you know, especially the vulnerable, and that's the people who wanted to get vaccinated. They've been done. People are moving. I had to nip to town, sir, in my lunch hour. Absolutely buzzing. But people do need, for all different reasons, to get off of this island. People come back to see their family, and they do it over these long bank holidays. They do it at half term, and if we do this and say people have to isolate, it's not always easy. I had to isolate with my 2 middle children when they came back in December because I've got a small flat. I couldn't say, well, they couldn't have come if I was going to work in Waitrose there because I was lucky. I'm privileged. I can sit in my house on my computer. After 5 days, sir, I didn't think they thought they were privileged. I think they were isolating, one in the loo and one in the kitchen. The problem is they could do it and I could do it because I've got this type of job. And I really think you have to think about the ordinary worker. Can they afford that extra week? Some might let them have it, but it'd be unpaid. You're taking the children out of school. No, people will not go and people want to go. I really think, I was listening to Senator Moore on the radio today, and she said we are simply servants of the people of Jersey. We are simply servants, and we can't ask them to do things that are not proportionate to where we have our cases today. Just because, and look, I'm not saying we won't have another wave. I'm saying we know what we know now, but we have the most vulnerable vaccinated, and we need to stop trying to stick our finger in this faucet and hoping the water doesn't keep flowing out, because we will have to live with some type of COVID for a while to come, and we think we've got it under control, and we've got the figures today, and I've heard nothing, no new evidence from the chair, Deputy Ward, and now Deputy Gardner. And I respect if they do have a little bit of different risk aversion to me, absolutely correct, but you don't put our risk aversions or your risk aversions on the people of Jersey who want to travel, are booking to travel, and they won't have a choice. They can't travel because they cannot get that extra time off work. So I think I've covered it all. Just keep the people in mind when you're thinking what's happening. They are waiting, they want to go away, and they want to come back to their island. Do not stop them from doing that, because you will only be stopping the hard workers. Won't affect the rich, it won't affect us, but it will affect middle, lower workers who have booked their holidays in November and December, around the school holidays, around the bank holidays, and that's who you're affecting today with no evidence and absolutely no mandate to do. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Senator Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I'm quite angry, actually, listening back to Deputy Martin's speech just now. There is an issue here of generational justice. So I've not had my vaccine. I've not been offered it. It's not been my turn yet. And virtually none of my friends have been offered it either, apart from those who've got health conditions that make them high risk. And these people seem to be forgotten in all of this. And Deputy Martin certainly sounds like she's forgotten them in her speech as well, talking about people who'd like to go away later, but for whom might struggle having to isolate on their way back. So ignoring the fact that it will be minimal for many of those people anyway, with any luck, hopefully the pandemic having improved significantly by these times, so the number of people affected is minimal. But we can't forget that a substantial proportion of our population have not been vaccinated because it's not been their term. And surely there ought to be some sort of trade-off here that says for those young people who have no chance of going away anytime soon because they're the generation who will have been financially worst affected by the crisis, who are last in line to get their vaccinations. So if we do go down the road of vaccine passports and all the rest of it, they'll be the ones who won't even have the choice, even if they do have the money. To say to those who are in the position of feeling comfortable leaving because they've been vaccinated or having the finances to be able to do so, to say, fine, you can go, and if you feel you want to, then do so. But the trade-off we ask is that when you come back, we're just going to apply things a little bit safer so we can be on the cautious side so that nobody else gets affected. And listening to Deputy Martin, I really wonder if any lessons have been learned from the second wave we suffered in December, where I remember the sheer sense of despair I felt at how helpless we would have felt as things were getting worse, and how it often felt that action was being taken too late. But so I think the key point here for me in justifying supporting this proposition is the second last paragraph in page 3 of the report of the proposition, which says, and I'll read the whole thing because I think it's key. It says, it's also clear from STAC minutes at relevant junctures in 2020 that the decision to change the green categorisation from 25 per 100,000 to 50 per 100,000 was not in line with the medical advice provided by the CEL. The view of the consultant in communicable disease control at the meeting of 7th September 2020 was that Jersey was performing well in comparison to neighbouring jurisdictions and that the change would not be helpful. The move to change the thresholds is described as a political decision in the STAC meetings, and one which appears to have been based on the desire to protect the economy through balanced risk. Well, sir, in this instance, I think we should listen to the scrutiny panel. And I think if we're going to talk about a strategy of balanced risks in the economy, for once, I'd quite like the interests of young people to be taken into account here, because it sounds like they're being totally forgotten. And that is my reason for supporting the scrutiny panel's proposition. The negative impact this will have on people will be absolutely minimal. That's just how it is, and it will get even better as time goes by, hopefully. But there are lots of people in our society who have been, whose rights I think are forgotten here, and that trade-off must surely be, you want to go away, fine, but we have to bear in mind that there are lots of people in the island who don't have that choice, not just for financial reasons, but because they haven't had the vaccine, and we're going to be on the cautious side. How I wish we'd been on the cautious side a bit more often in the last year. Thank you, sir.
Much. Does anyone else wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Piddle.
Thank you, sir. Throughout my terms in government, I have always advocated consistency. Relating to COVID, we have maintained an adherence to the advice from STAC, the Scientific and Technical Advisory Cell. We have set and published the guidelines to be instated on the 26th of April. And the STAC advice from today is that up to 50 people is appropriate. There is no room for complacency, but a staggered reintroduction of connection is enormously important for families, business, and our economic recovery. We are only opening borders for the UK and other Crown dependencies at this stage. And of course, the reliance on the responsible behaviour of travellers is paramount in the successful delivery of the lifting of restrictions. There is no evidence to change these guidelines at such short notice. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chief Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. Just as having been notified as the main respondent, I thought it might be appropriate for me to go now and try and deal with some of the comments that have been emerging, and equally, hopefully they'll address some other concerns as people hopefully listening. Fairly obviously, sir. Apologies. Right, hopefully that works. Hopefully, sir. Fairly obviously, sir, I do want to be speaking against this proposition. Now, I know it isn't the intention of the Safe Travel Guidelines Review Panel, as they said in their report, because the aim is to enhance the measures already put in place by the government. But this proposition will have a significant impact, and it doesn't actually make things safer in any meaningful way. I think that's the fundamental point that we need to remember. I'll address it in various points, hopefully as I go through the speech, but it does not make a significant difference in the level of risk, sir, but it does have a significant difference through the negative consequences that would come as a result of what's being proposed. And it is with regret, sir, and this is our information. I hope if the panel can correct it, excellent. But certainly from our information, as far as we're aware, the panel have not sought advice from either the public health team, sir, from STAC, or from relevant ministers. And if they had, they would have noted that given our current good position, STAC and public health have endorsed the government's decision to reconnect with the thresholds as currently set out. And we made that in our decision making, sir, at competent authorities. That was certainly one of the key questions asked directly of the chair of STAC, and he said very clearly the majority view of STAC was to stick with 50. And it does rather feel, sir, that the fundamental one is that a lot of reliance is being placed on minutes that are 6 to 7 months old, which predate what everybody has said is our fantastic vaccination rollout, and obviously again ignore the current views of STAC, which were actually relayed to members during the briefing on the 19th of March. Now, sir, I believe our estimation, it was also made 2 or 3 days ago, sir, but I believe it remains the same, that if this Assembly was to adopt this proposition today, we would at a stroke turn around 2/3 of the green regions in the UK to amber. And so therefore, sir, as has already been alluded to, this would affect reasonably significant numbers of islanders over the next few weeks. It would put them into a difficult position. They would either have to cancel their plans to visit friends and relatives, and some of whom they have not seen for months. In fact, I had one email from someone, sir, who said they've not seen a member of their family for, I think it was 2 years, or, as has been already alluded to, sir, submit to a 5-day isolation period as upon their return, without having time to prepare, without time to book leave from work, or to make arrangements for their children's education or care, etc., sir. And that is the consequence, sir, of this proposition. And we have had a number of us members have received emails from concerned islanders expressing their dismay that plans to visit family members in the UK might be disrupted or cancelled so with such little notice, because they will have all booked their tickets in good faith, with confidence in our testing regime, vaccination programme and the public guidance. And essentially, sir, how will they feel if, from their perspective, we break that trust? Because what we are doing, sir, is we are unfreezing our existing red, amber, green system, which was announced over a month ago. Now, sir, our public health officials, so to again remind members of the risk factor, our public health officials have assessed the potential benefits of the panel's proposition, and as we said, have found that the change of the threshold from 50 to 25 would deliver minuscule benefit. And that's because our existing red, amber, green rating and the triple test system already provide for safety at our island borders. And it is a cautious reconnection programme on island. We have rolled also out a vaccination programme which, like the UK's, ranks among the best in the world. And as again worth reminding members of what the Health Minister said before lunch, but the extra benefit of seeding avoided from this proposition, and this is per 1,000 people, is estimated at somewhere between, I think it's 0.2 travellers. It's less than 1, sir. And don't forget that extra risk would, that reduction, that change, sir, will also be captured at the border, sir. Now, sir, there have been some comments made which I will like to address. We've had references about generational justice with any luck. Comments, well, a lot of that was opinions, I would suggest, or being a little bit safer. Well, the point is here, sir, and we have talked about balance of risks and lives particularly, and livelihoods, and mental health and well-being and all the other impacts. It is not just about COVID, the issues that we've been having to consider. And so, as I've just said, sir, the reduction in risk from this proposition is negligible, but that is from the professional advisors that we have, from public health, from STAC, all the rest, that the calculation that the impact of going from 50 to 25 in terms of reduction in risk is negligible, but the impact of that reduction in other ways is significant, and that is why we are not supporting it, sir. I think I need to go down. I'll try and, I think probably in reverse order, sir. Senator Moore actually, I think, demonstrated quite clearly the reason that moving away from just the 50 and 25 issue, the larger regions issue, I think demonstrated quite clearly why actually sticking with the existing regime makes sense. She stated from her investigations that the average number of cases across the entire United Kingdom was 25.2 for the whole country. Well, actually, sir, if you go into, if one applied that argument, sir, which is essentially a very similar argument to the one that's being talked to go to the, I think it's the upper tier area, sir. In other words, larger regions than what we're talking about. The problem is you lose areas which are specifically higher. So there are areas in the UK which do still need to be ranked as amber or red. If that rate still drops in the UK, and for the sake of argument it goes down to 24, then under that system, according to the Senator, everybody would be able to come in under a green ranking, even though they were coming from an amber or red lower tier area, sir. And so therefore, fundamentally, sir, I think that just demonstrates why sticking with the existing system, and we have had that discussion with STAC, and those comments, those remarks are laid out in the in our comments, sir, which is basically there's been no scientific evidence has been provided within the accompanying report, the proposition for Part B of the proposition, which seeks to change the scale of classification to upper tier local authorities. As was made clear to states members on the 19th of March 2020, STAC considered the relative merits of different spatial scales and can find no strong evidence that different regional sizes offered superior levels of protection. So as such, we concluded that maintaining the lower tier local authority area classification offered islanders consistency of the scheme that's been in operation for Jersey prior to December 2020. And as I said, I think Senator Moore's example clearly demonstrates why that is a better recommendation. The Conduct Iveson ones also alluded to it. I think the comments Senator Moore about offering clarity is absolutely, I actually absolutely agree with her. Deputy Martin also addressed that. Islanders do want clarity. That's why we gave a month's warning, sir. And therefore, basically, having brought this debate slightly forward, to be doing this on the Thursday before the Monday is not going to give the clarity and the certainty that that they seek. I do have to just also address some comments that have been made, sir, about the circuit breaker being self-inflicted. It was unavoidable, etc., etc. So, and basic implications that essentially, if we'd almost gone into quarantine, sir, and followed our other jurisdictions, that we would never have to do that. Well, I think it's very clear, sir, that both our fellow islands, fellow Crown dependencies, who have followed much tighter regimes in terms of the travel borders, have seen significant spikes in their numbers and have had to take measures to do so. So, and I think whichever way one looks at it, the fact that the reduction in risk from this proposition, the improvement in safety, for want of a better expression, or the reduction in risk of infection from this is negligible, but the other consequences arising from the proposition are significant, basically means that argument isn't really valid in the context that we're operating under, sir. I think again to address some of what Deputy Gardner said, sir, and sir, we have been very clear. The April 2021, sir, is not the same position as in September or October 2020. The consensus in STAC and their advice now is that using 50 is appropriate. And sir, I think I also just want to clarify, sir, this is not just about tourism. In terms of the connectivity, volume that we are expecting, sir, over the coming months, and I don't know the exact time period, sir, but certainly relative to 2019, we're anticipating flights are still going to be significantly down in this year compared to 2019, because that is just the nature of how the industry has changed. So we are not expecting to see floods of tourists flocking to the island as they did in the past, but this is about a cautious reconnection, sir. As I said, the overall reduction in risk of the proposed measures that this proposition is bringing is negligible, but the consequences are severe. And the point I make about it not just being about tourism, sir, is that ability for islanders, as I've said already, to reconnect, sir, with their families who they have not seen for a long time in certain incidences. In our comments, sir, which again, obviously one or two members don't appear to have read, we've said that based on regional classifications as of 20th of April, a total of 150 UK regions would shift from green to amber, that's 62% of green regions, if we were to change the threshold to less than 25 per 100,000 over 14 days. That is a significant impact, sir, at very, very short notice, and will therefore impact upon a significant number of the islanders who are forecast to travel. I think, sir, the final observation I would make before concluding is again, sir, to sorry, sir, I just lost one piece of paper, to remind members of the comment from the Minister, which was essentially the ability to respond quickly. We have, sir, briefed as often as we possibly can and in advance both members of changes in the Safe Travel Policy. We will always seek to do so, sir. We did so on the 19th of March for both scrutiny and states members, and that's why, sir, we hope that members can be assured that we consider the third part of the proposition to be unnecessary as well. But the but from there, sir, is that the comments are there will be times when we may need to move swiftly, and we need to retain that flexibility, sir. And swiftly can sometimes mean within hours, sir, at antisocial hours. So COVID has not been easy. I think that should be very clear. We've had to make difficult decisions that take a balance of risks approach of dealing with the health problems of COVID, of the wider health problems of COVID, including mental health and well-being, and then, sir, balancing the needs of the economy. And as I've said on many times, sir, balancing the needs of the economy is not just about money. If one loses one's job because the firm has gone bust, that in itself has health consequences and mental health problems. But that is why there is a balance of issues that we have to consider. And therefore, sir, our view is that this proposition will not make any meaningful difference to the island's border measures, sir. It will, however, make a significant difference to island's travel plans. It will frustrate their hopes to safely visit family members in the United Kingdom, and it is just at present those members of the common travel area, excluding the Republic of Ireland. It will compel them to isolate on their return without having had time to make suitable arrangements. And frankly, sir, with the short notice, I think it will there will be some element of loss of trust in the Assembly, sir. And for all those reasons, sir, I really do urge members to vote against all parts of this proposition. And thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I'm very pleased that we're having this debate in public. I think it's a year ago, in July last year, we had a similar debate, and of course we've all kept an eye on the events since then. Obviously, not being in the competent ministers group, of course, I haven't had the benefit of conversations with STAC. I think the last input I was able to do, as we all did as States members, on the briefing on the 19th of March when it was announced what the forward plan were. And so I think this is a really good opportunity to take stock of of what's happened. Over a year, the island has incurred £190 million of public costs to respond. We've had very significant effect on our society. There's been very substantial disruption. Health, we have a backlog of health treatments and so on that people are waiting for. Community life has been disrupted. Churches, events and sports and so on have all been affected, and of course economic damage. So here we are now, we're in a period now where we have this really successful vaccination program, which is, and I'll be clear about this, not yet complete. It's really important that we see this through, and through the younger generations, and no question about that, sir. And so we are just now beginning now to get life back to normal. We can go to events. This Saturday we can go to Jersey Rugby and enjoy that match. We can come together probably as an assembly. I don't think we're too far away from that. We can have island plan events with public meetings and so on. We are getting back to that. And I think that's really important as an island. And so what have we learned looking back? We've gone through that. We've learned that, as every society in the world knows, is that border quarantine works. Right back to the Middle Ages, the Black Death and so on, they knew it there. And I think we've seen that societies have done that well, have managed the level of infections and the effect on their community. So we've also known that in those situations that the principal source of infection coming to those communities where there has not been a breadth of community spread has come from borders. And then, of course, vaccination programs. the scientists now are working on this really hard to try and find out what is the longevity of these vaccines. How long does the immune responses last for? We don't know. I think there's general talk. I think there's to be a consensus that we're due for a top-up program probably in the autumn, providing the scientists can come up with vaccines that address the enhanced risk of these variants. And that is, I think, one of the major changes in the risk level that exists in other places. Because of the prevalence of the vaccines throughout the planet, the more of the virus, the more the virus is out there, the more it mutates, and the more then the ones that bypass the vaccines are going to be prevalent, and that's what happens with natural ecosystems of viruses. And so we've got these at least 3 variants there. We hear about them pretty well every day, and they have potentially what is not known. And not yet known is their propensity to bypass the immunity levels. So we've learned those things, I think. And so when we look, I think where I noticed on what the Chief Minister said there. He talked about a really important principle. This is what we're debating here, is what is the level of risk our community should be prepared to enter into in order to make sure that life within our community can continue. And of course, the Chief Minister said, well, there was not a significant increase in the level of risk as a result of the difference between the numbers, the formulas that are planned to use, the one that the scrutiny panel brought forward, and the one which is intended. And I do remember asking this question last time, why have we chosen a different rate to others? And I was told, well, there's no real difference. And of course, what we see in the note, yes, we've got some numbers on that, but I don't think that's the right question. And that ties into what Deputy Martin said. Deputy Martin said, absolutely agree with her. We have to have measures in place which are proportionate to the risk. And the risk then is to, in my view, proportionate to the risk. The risk is of the infection coming in to our community. It's proportionate to that. That's the thing. And I think that any sort of risk management approach, one looks at not just the probability, the likelihood of the numbers, but if it does occur, if the event does occur, what's its impact? And so obviously when you have a risk which is both very likely, high impact, my word, you have to put that at the top of your risk management list. And when it's low impact and low probability, you don't care. If it's high probability and low impact, well, you probably can live with it. But in my view, if you have a low probability but a high impact, then I think it does require you to measure that risk and take proportionate measures. And I think we got here a proposal, I believe, to do that. And of course, what's my argument for that? Because we saw in the second wave where we didn't have that in place. We didn't have the quarantine and we introduced it, and full marks that was done. But of course, the infection levels went extraordinarily high and put us into the red band. And it took us several months to get back to where we are at virtually nil. And I think our community has done wonders to do that. It's cost us, but my word. And now, my hope, because we do have to re-engage, we do have to do this. And of course, we haven't closed our borders at all. What I think that the discussion is about is people are free to travel. But, you know, how much inconvenience are we going to ask of travellers to help us keep our community safe? And so I think we're talking about, what, I don't know how many days are. What's the difference between a green and a yellow? 5 days? I don't know. Does it have to be 5? I know, but at least the point is this: is that all the science indicates that a person travelling with a day not 5. Oh, I got a 5-day from. Thank you very much. I'm pleased about that. So it says 5. So now 5. Now people, I think that's what the challenge is. Is that really too much to ask? Now, how do you reduce that? What I don't understand is why haven't the airlines produced 3 pre-travel tests? Because that would deal with it. If people had 72-hour tests before travel, then we wouldn't be having this discussion, because that could be part of the normal procedure for people to travel. There's no sort of vaccine passport issue there, because it's, people get a test, you can travel, and then you avoid, and that's done by lots of societies. Look at Iceland; they certainly do that. If you've got pre-tests, then you can not have those quarantine arrangements. I don't understand why somehow or other this is just not happening. So there are ways that could be managed. So for me personally, I can accept that this coming forward late is really far from ideal. But of course there is an issue of better late than never, because what I don't want to see happen, here we are at the point where our society is back to normal, and I am so pleased about this now, and our mental health and everything can be recovered. And now we're at a point where we have to make a decision. How much risks are we going to expose our community to that situation deteriorating? I think it is inevitable that with the borders we will see that infection go up. Nobody knows the time. Would that be July? It won't be June, I don't think. Will it be July? Will it be August? I don't know. I'm really very hopeful, as we all are. We'll have a really good summer, and I certainly want to travel. But do I? Okay, then I can afford it. So I do accept Deputy Martin's point that I can afford to quarantine for 5 days, and well, I'm lucky because I can work from home. I accept that. But I think this is part of it. I think that, COVID is going to be around the world for a very long time. And I don't any thought that, okay, now we're all back to normal, we can just go in, open it, I think so. I think this is a good debate. And I think I'm very persuaded by this, because it seems to me quite a small change. And I do think it's open to the airlines to do things. For example, all the people who want to travel, why can't they have 72-hour tests? What's wrong with that? Because it seems to me that would avoid this situation. And this is where the airline industry needs to adapt. So, sir, I am minded to support this. I'm pleased to have the debate. And by the way, I'm sorry, I should have right at the beginning, I meant to say, Deputy Gardner, thank you, because you articulated the argument so outstandingly. Thank you for doing that. And hopefully I haven't taken away from that. Hopefully I might have added a few points there, but I'm very minded to go along with the proposition, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Wickenden.
Thank you, sir. I actually wanted to speak because I want to respond to Senator Mezek. But firstly, I have to say to Deputy Young that many working people in this island cannot afford 5 days. They just cannot get that time to go away, come back and have 5 days. They don't have the luxury in that manner, sir. And that's what we're talking about, not people who have worked at the higher echelons and senior positions their whole life. People right now that really have only a few days holiday and they have to use them sparingly, or in summer holidays because they've got children or the likes. They don't have the luxury of 5 days. I spoke, I stood to speak because I was a little bit outraged by Senator Mezek's speech earlier, talking about generational fairness. I just thought it was outrageous that the senator spoke for his generation. That let's be honest, last year in that glorious summer we had, was able to go out and have meals, socially distanced, with seating service only, enjoy the summer and go out, where there was a whole generation in Jersey that didn't get that freedom, that were sat at home fearful of going out of their house, of going to the shops. There were children in this island that did not get to see their grandparents or their aunties or their uncles in that family unit that we know for children is so important. I think it was outrageous to declare that there was a generation that haven't had their vaccines yet, and it would be unfair on them if we were to do such today as open in the way that we would. There were generations of people that were prisoners in their home that didn't get to enjoy the same freedoms as the generation of Senator Mezek, or even myself, sir. Let's not forget that last year, certainly with the advice that's being picked out and quoted selectively from the minutes of September 2020. September 2020 was a different place to April 2021 or May 2021. The consensus of STAC and their advice now is that the 50 is appropriate figure to go forward. But let's not deny the children of this island the ability to finally see their grandparents or their aunties or their uncles. Let's not deny the generation that was locked in their houses and scared to leave, when other generations were out in the freedom and the sunshine of that beautiful summer we had, the chance to go and do that. I think it's outrageous to fight that generational card in such a manner when there were so many people that weren't able to have the freedoms that the younger generation had right now. And that is why they were the most vulnerable. They couldn't go out, sir, and that's why they are the highest of the list of the vaccines, sir. I think we need to be fair, generationally fair, for the people that have struggled the hardest over this time of the COVID pandemic, and allow them their freedoms now that we're getting to the right place, sir. In that case, I will not be supporting this amendment, and I ask other members on generational fairness to allow that to happen, sir. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Pamplin.
Thank you, sir. I've been waiting to speak in this debate as a member of the panel, and also as somebody who's been scrutinising as part of the health panel the COVID pandemic all the way through. And there's a few things I just wanted to raise at this stage. Firstly, we, as others have stated, it's been an experience for all of us, no matter what side of the aisle you sit on. And I have the utmost respect for everybody who's been involved in the decision-making process, including the council ministers and the competent authorities and their decision-making. It's not been an easy process, and they've done the best that they can. Same goes for scrutiny. We have tried under the same but different pressures to provide the service that's expected as the third voice of this assembly, to be a critical friend. And we have all tried to juggle our many roles of this assembly to do that. To make the point of why we couldn't bring this earlier, well, we have now the 3 weeks in between state sittings this year, and of course we had the Easter break as well, so there's been an extended time between sittings. So we have tried our best to meet, as ministers have mentioned, write to ministers and work around everybody to try and get as much available information to try and bring something that we think, as Deputy Young said, is important to debate in the public domain, so we can air all sides of concerns from islanders. So yes, it would have been more ideal to do this earlier. And I also stress that, again, when dealing with matters of this pandemic, there has been many times when we haven't had the luxury of time, and we've reduced lodging periods because it's been the right thing to do, because time is against us, and it's important that we have debates. Regardless, there's been many times when we've had very little time to scrutinise certain things that have come through and then voting. It's been part of this pandemic, which we've all tried our very best to manage, and it hasn't been easy. Also wanted to raise the point, as others are making, of where we are right now, and the island is in a very grateful place, and we cannot forget and pay tribute to all our islanders who have been through this and gone through different experiences of this pandemic, as many have outlined, and it's to the great efforts and tributes that we have to pay to islanders who have gone through this experience and done what has been asked of them and more. And they are in the same place we all find ourselves in. We find ourselves in a good place. We look at what's happening in India right now, and we look at some places of the world who are struggling with their vaccine, like Australia right now, and other areas of the world who are still in the grips of the pandemic that rages on. And we are very fortunate, and we're very blessed and very lucky for where we live on this island and where we are in this place. And because of that, we know, alongside the vaccination and following the mitigation and the advice from Dr. Muscat and others, we are in a good place. Islanders have been great at wearing masks, at washing their hands, at following general guidance. But we're in this place, and there is, of course, wariness, I would say. I think that's the right phrase to work, of islanders who are generally wary of that. The other main protection that we have as an island is our borders, and the things in place that we have our side. We have, again, ahead of many other jurisdictions, have testing at the borders. And when we look back in time at certain bigger countries of the world and where they took longer to introduce such border policies, will be standing the test of time. But we here have had that testing regime at our borders. And again, we pay tribute to that because that has been a massive part of our success. However, when we have mentioned in the report the situation in December, we are absolutely aware if it was of that time and different circumstances, of course. They are only similar in this situation in terms of the place that we find ourselves in now. As I said, there's a lot of noise about variants at the moment across the world, but particularly in the United Kingdom. And it's good to be wary, and it's good to keep a close eye on things. And that's what we've tried to do through this whole process and trying to bring something to the Assembly. Because last September, October, November, we were in a similar position. We were wary of where the UK was heading, where we were heading. We didn't have the vaccination rollout in place at that stage. And of course, there was wariness about a variant that had been picked up in the United Kingdom, which before we knew it, did escalate, and very quickly. So suddenly parts of the United Kingdom and us had to take immediate action very quickly, much to the detriment of all of us who didn't want to have that to happen. And we're seeing the continual wave of that in France and parts of Europe right now. But thankfully, they seem to be rolling out their vaccinations, but they're still dealing with that. So there is wariness, and we thought it was only right that we have a debate in this Assembly so we can draw out all the facts and information instead of behind closed doors with meetings and briefings. We just think this is the People's Assembly, and it was right that we bring this forward. The UK Chief Medical Advisor, Professor Chris Whitty, said that obviously they're very cautious, and they are confident that the path that they're in now does look better. And we should expect bumps and twists along the way. The most immediate problem, he said, was likely to be local outbreaks, and variation in uptake between different areas leaves some places particularly vulnerable. And meanwhile, in the longer term, of course, variants that could spread more easily because they evade some of the immune responses could come into play, he went on to say. So that's where we are now, where we're fully aware that the UK are doing surge testing, even though those numbers are small. It's important to stress, again, not to be alarmist, they are small, of the variant discovered in South Africa and the variant which is causing great trouble in India, that they have the potential, if not maintained, as the UK comes out of lockdown, it could have an effect. And what we wanted to seek to say is we do have an option here, like we had previously, which, as the chair pointed out, was a political decision with these guidelines that we are trying to put forward for debate now. So I just wanted to raise all those points. I've always tried to be fair and balanced and seeing both sides of everybody's points of view during this pandemic. I've always stressed this has always been down to a lot of things, communication, and regular information being provided in a way to islanders. And I say it again because I've got the opportunity. I know we may have different views about this, but Dr. Muscat, when he speaks, is such a voice of reassurance to islanders. It's all very well and good he coming to speak to us as states members, and we do our best to translate that to public. But if he could regular speak and advise and educate and explain where we are, where the UK is, what the variants mean and where we are, it will go some way to help islanders as they go through a weary period of welcoming the travel expansion that we see. And it's also fair to say that looking at the numbers for bookings in the first couple of weeks of May, you're looking at about 100 people flying in the island a day at the moment, and that may go up. So, you know, I think that context is important, and we all want to get to the summer. We all want to see as much, especially for the local travel companies who've done phenomenal work to keep their businesses going. They need it, we need it. And of course, as others have said, it's part of humanity to be connected with the world. We just wanted to bring this forward from a place of, there was a similar previous before in December, and a decision was taken not to do this. The UK is unlocking now. France still has a problem, but is getting better. We are here in the middle saying there is a wariness about doing this. But if we are convinced, and I'm grateful for all the comments and information that's been provided, that's been made public, I think that's going to help. But we just got to remember, while we are in a strong position, and we are in the UK, it seems they are in a strong position as they are unlocking over the next few weeks and months. Nothing should be taken for granted with this virus. And I look forward to hearing the rest, if there is another rest of this debate, and the chair in summing up. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy, does anyone else wish to a point of clarification, Deputy Martin?
Yes, from the deputy. I thank you. I wasn't quite sure he was on the panel. Yes, and I did ask if the next panel person who spoke, because the other two had already spoken about the actual meetings. You know, he spoke greatly about Dr. Muscat and his red stack, but have they actually met? And if they haven't, what was the issue? Would they not meet with them? Because
well, I'm not sure that latter part is a point of clarification.
Oh, okay, but yeah.
But I think the first question is, as meetings have been referred to, it's reasonable to ask if there have been meetings as point of clarification.
Yes,
yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah, happy to say that we have had meetings. I don't have the full schedule in front of me, but I'm sure the chair will help and sum up in his summing up. But as I alluded to, we have had the Easter break, and we have written, we have spoken to in the briefings and meetings that states members and scrutiny members have had. But I'll allow the chair to clarify any further if needed.
Very much. Deputy Guida.
Sorry, sir. Can I just seek a further point of clarification? The text probably, the chat probably didn't get to you in time. When the Deputy Pampton referred to meetings, did he mean scrutiny meetings? Because I think the question from Deputy Martin was whether the panel had met with Stack and when.
That was, I thought, what the question was being asked, Deputy Pampton. So if you're able to assist on a point of clarification, or it may be better to leave it for Deputy Ward's response, that's a possibility as well.
Yeah, like I said, I'm scrambling to get up all the calendar and diaries and meetings, and I will assist the chair in his summing up, and I'm sure he will cover it as well.
Very well. Deputy Guida.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about risk and appetite for risk. People have been talking here about some having more of an appetite for risk than others. Everybody sitting in this assembly today has an appetite for risk because they got out of bed and they, went out and they drove or cycled or walked to the assembly. Even people in their homes have an appetite for risk because they left their bed again and they are now working with computers probably connected to electricity. To live, we have to have an appetite for risk. Of course, it has to be reasonable. And that's the problem that we have today. COVID-19 is not going to get better. We are reaching the point where most of our population is going to be vaccinated. and the illness is going to stay. Not only it is going to stay, but it is going to mutate, it's going to change, and we will have different viruses every year. This is the new normal, and we have to decide what sort of new normal do we want. Do we want a new normal where we have closed borders and anybody coming in must spend 14 days in isolation? Or what about, complete quarantine? Just have a hotel at the airport and they don't leave the airport until they've shown for 14 days that they had nothing. We have to live with this. Any restriction that we make now, there will not be a good reason to take it away in 2 months' time or 3 months' time. We will not be able to say, well, it's fine now. So everything can come back to normal. We have to live with it. The green, amber, and red system that has been proposed is very, very reasonable. It's very, very small numbers. And considering that we will be testing everybody, the risk of anybody coming through is extremely low. It is extremely low. And it is very important. It will not improve. There is no chance that in the world there'll be less than 25 cases per 100,000 anywhere in the world, because many people will not have been vaccinated. Many people are asymptomatic, and this virus, like the flu, will remain. What if we did the same thing about the flu? The flu is also deadly. It's also really nasty and annoying. So what if we said, well, any country that has more than 25 cases of the flu per 100,000, they cannot come here, or they can come here, but they have a 2 weeks quarantine? It just doesn't work. This is how we have to live with it, and it has to be reasonable. It has to allow us to lead a normal life. Thank you, sir.
Any other member wish to speak on this proposition? No other member wishes to speak on the proposition? Deputy Higgins.
Do apologise, there must be a delay in this thing. I type as fast as I can. In fact, it was prepared to send. Can I just say at the beginning here, very often in this assembly, we have to make very difficult decisions. And sometimes they relate to issues which at the time we make them, there's no obvious right or wrong answer. And only time will tell whether we've made the correct decision or not. And very often these issues relate to items which divide islanders. And members are damned by half the island if they vote one way, and damned by half the island if they vote the other way. Now, the decision to accept the proposition that's been put forward by the Safer Travel Review Panel is one of them. I'm a member of this panel, and even I do not know at the present time whether I'll be supporting our own proposition. But I do believe the Assembly should debate this matter and examine the issues. In fact, I believe more COVID-19 matters should be debated in the States, and not just by the small number of members who decided these matters at the height of the pandemic when speed was critical. Now, whether we come to the right decision or not, as I've already said, will be determined by time, and whether or not we experience the third wave of the pandemic. And if we do experience the third wave, the effect of the vaccine program in preventing death and serious illness. So it's one of these awkward ones. Now, we've been told repeatedly, it's an unpredictable virus. And we're only just over a year from the introduction of the virus into the island. And from that time to the present, we've learned a great deal. When it arrived, we were told that it could overwhelm the health service, as we were not prepared. We didn't have sufficient PPE, we didn't have sufficient ventilators or CPAP machines. We are being advised by the doctors that they needed the power to determine life and death, decide who they could treat and who they couldn't. We invested in the Nightingale Hospital, which I fully endorsed, because we needed to have an insurance policy if things got bad. And looking at the figures, they were exceptionally bad with the possible projections. So we have this virus, which, yes, things have got better because most surprisingly, the scientific community and the pharmaceuticals companies have managed to produce vaccines in record time, which give a measure of protection. But what we still don't know is a great deal about this virus. And we're seeing it day by day. We're hearing of new variants. The one in India, for example, which is not in the highest category yet because they haven't been able to measure the effect of it, but it could be pretty bad. We also know from figures coming from the United States that the virus is breaking through vaccinated people, and they can get the disease. Even people who've had the disease are finding they're not immune from the virus. Now, it's relatively small numbers at the moment, but it is a cause for concern and is being monitored. So it's one of these things here. It comes down to each person essentially has got to come to a conclusion about the amount of risk we're going to take. For example, the Chief Minister and others had mentioned about balance of risk. And the truth of the matter is, each one of us has a different sort of, we could say fulcrum. You know, it swings and balances in different directions. Some of us are more wary, and if you've been shielding for a year and you're vulnerable, you are going to be very wary of increased cross-border activity. On the other hand, if you've been locked up shielding, and many people have, and you've got a very small flat, you haven't got a balcony, and you haven't had a garden, and you were locked in it for quite some time, and you didn't have the freedom that you had, it's the equivalent of being in prison. And yes, you want to get out and you want to enjoy more freedom. There's many people who feel the island is a prison, in the sense they can't wait to get off the island and go on holiday. There are others, yes, have a genuine desire to go and see their friends and relatives in the UK, especially the elderly. You know, I know one States member, for example, is in the UK at the moment because an elderly relative is poorly and may not survive. And yes, they want to be there. Now, I can understand all these issues. So there's competing desires on the part of some people. Some want open borders, some want more restrictive or more gentle opening up. Some people may feel we made a premature decision by deciding to dismantle the Nightingale Hospital, because the counter argument is that the vaccine means that if you get the disease, it should not be as severe. You may not get the cytokine storm that everyone is afraid of, where your immune system attacks you and makes the thing worse. We've still got issues to do with long COVID. There are many people who have had the disease who are suffering from neurological, cardiac, and so I'm just trying to think of the term. Actually, it's to do with lungs. It's the pulmonary. Sorry, it's escaped me anyway. But there are lots of issues to do with long COVID that we don't know about. We also know about the cause of the backlog to the hospital of all other types of ailments, and the fact that people aren't getting operations they need or aren't getting this or that. So members have got a very, very difficult decision to make here. And I say we're going to be damned if we do and damned if we don't. And it all will come down to our individual view of balance of risk. And all I can say is I still haven't made up my own mind. And as I say, if other people could speak, maybe I'll make my a decision. Yes, thank you, Deputy Alves, for the pulmonary edema. Thank you. So all I can say, it's a difficult decision, and I hope the public will bear with us. And imagine you're faced with the same situation, because you're not only determining it for yourself, you're determining it for others in the island and the more vulnerable. And yes, I hate to mention it, but also the economy. And I accept the argument that we need to have the economy ticking over. And we've already seen damage to it, and we spent 190 million to date, very largely 100 million at least, on the co-funding scheme. And many businesses, yes, are probably teetering on the edge. And if we continue to be more restrictive, some of them may fail. And then we have the problem of unemployment. So it is no simple answer one way or another. And all I can say is bear with us. We're trying our hardest with a very difficult decision. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy of St Peter.
Thank you, sir. Over the last year, we are starting to live with COVID, and The reason we're doing that is we have a great debt to the fantastic scientists around the world who have managed to, in record time, bring vaccinations, multiple organizations, multiple countries working together, have brought vaccinations today to this island, which means we can actually have a debate about our borders. Must thank them for that. And they also means we can start to live with COVID. Now, Deputy Guida brought up a very interesting point about flu. We live with flu. Sadly, as many as up to 5 people a year die in this island of flu. And we have a vaccination rate of something like 70% of people are vaccinated with flu. But it's a fact, but we've learned to live with it. We don't have a daily forecast that comes out in our inboxes telling us how many cases of flu they have and whether they were caught at the borders or not. We just live with this. And I think COVID is something we're going to have to do the same and take thanks for the advice that we get. We have been looked after very well, and our STAC and our track and trace team and our vaccinators have meant we're in a situation today that we could publish a month ago our traffic light system for our safe travel policy. And we again thank them for that. Now that was published a month ago with no objections until this proposition was lodged a week ago. And I agree it is right to debate it. The island needs to know our thoughts and what we're thinking and the care and consideration we consider in coming to our decisions. So I'm supportive of this debate for that reason. Now, when this traffic light system was published a month ago, decisions started to be made, be it hotels over here, be it airlines, be it Condor, be it whatever, starting to plan in order to open up their businesses, to welcome us in staycations or to welcome tourists across to us, welcome tourists to our island. They don't just click a switch and off they go. There's a lot of planning that's involved. And that is the real point. And I'm going to use an example of a decision that's been made. It's small in numbers, but it's very, very high in profile. And that is the decision that British and Irish Lions have taken to come for a 2-week training camp here before going to South Africa. Whether you agree with it or not, it's not relevant. The point is it's a decision they've made based on what they've seen here. They see a great island, they see great sports facilities, they see hotels opening up, and they see an area that they can be safe. Now, if they look at this and see that we have changed our mind at the last minute and changed the strategy, which means we might not be as welcoming, we might not be as ideal, the great publicity we gained will spin on a sixpence and become negative publicity. Now, don't take it that this is a pitch for the Lions. I'm a rugby fan, as everybody knows. It isn't a pitch for that. It's just an example of all the many, many decisions that are being taken when we publish something that we are going to, and the conditions of which we're going to open up our borders. And so I leave it with that thought. We must be consistent. Deputy Martin and Deputy Bennell talked about consistencies. We must be consistent with our decision making to those who we serve and who we look after, that they can make plans around our decisions and we give them as much notice as possible. With that, sir, I say thank you very much.
Very much indeed. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. Pressed the wrong button, apologies. I'm very pleased to follow the previous speaker because I too just really want to say that it is absolutely right to have this debate. And it is absolutely wrong to criticise the length of time for preparation for the debate because the travel policy was announced a month ago. The scrutiny panel will have had to have time to read, digest, understand, speak to people, come to their own conclusions before they then have to draft the proposition, lodge the proposition, and so on. So there was only ever going to be a short time for this debate, but it's entirely right to have it. And the reasons it is right to have it, principally, are because, I'm sorry, but the travel policy in October, November, and December last year was disastrous. We led to deaths that needn't have taken place, and that's a disaster for every single one, and I believe it's 32 people died after from December. Those in the main need not have happened, and I know of at least two, and one person personally who passed away from COVID in January before their time. And for that reason, and in respect of their memories, it is right that we question and we discuss amongst ourselves whether or not we are happy with this travel policy. And so to hear members of the Council of Ministers saying, oh, not enough time, oh, this is lodged so late, it's not right. There must be respect for the scrutiny process. There must be respect for alternative views to be placed before the Assembly. And it's right to debate them on the facts, on the opinions, because risk is an opinion. At the end of the day, we've heard that from different people. And that's why we're here. So I'm just incredibly disappointed to hear members of the Council of Ministers throwing those accusations at the scrutiny panel, who I know are just trying their best, doing their best, and just want the island to feel assured that this travel policy has been looked at, has been passed through 49 members of this Assembly, and we come to a decision as to whether it is the right way forward or not. The island has every reason to want that to take place. And those 32 people who lost their lives in December and January, we owe it to them to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes twice, because in my view, those were mistakes. And there is no higher cost than the loss of life. And we can look perhaps at Jersey's figures and say, well, 69 people in 100,000, that compares well with other jurisdictions. That's the high level view, but we're a small community and the high level view doesn't always stand. And like I say, to the person that I knew who passed away, it's difficult when I think of them to take that high level view. And I think that we need to just look at ourselves and think, actually, it's entirely right that we have this debate today. There is another reason, and that's been mentioned, I believe Senator Mezek mentioned it. It's in the language of the justifications for policies over the course of the pandemic. Islanders have consistently cried out for straight talking. And we heard earlier about references to the medical advice is X, the medical advice is Y. And then we see the Stack minutes and see that it was an entirely political decision. Well, some may think that Stack is there to make those political decisions, and that's fine. That's not a problem. But the problem is the use of words to make it look like it's an entirely medically led decision, when actually it wasn't. And there has been some clever use of language at times to try and say, well, you know, we listened to the medical advice and we came to this conclusion. That doesn't mean the medical advice was that conclusion. That's absolutely correct. And the English language allows all of that. But the islanders, since March 2020, have just been asking for straight talking. That hasn't been there throughout the pandemic. And as a result, I can understand why some people, particularly in this Assembly, and having been on the scrutiny side of the arguments at times, I was crying out for some straight talking. And in the absence of that straight talking, it's entirely right that we sit here and have a debate to ensure that we get the matters straight and understand them fully. I personally won't be supporting the move to 25 for 100,000. I think we are in a position with the vaccine where we can take that slightly higher level of risk. That is my opinion. I don't know how many other people in this Assembly share that. I'll find out when the vote is taken. But I just want those people who have stood up, particularly on the ministerial side, and seem to have been angry that scrutiny have even brought this. To them, I say you are wrong. It is completely correct that scrutiny have brought this. It is their role to bring this. That is why they are there. And given the cost that failed travel policy back in October, November and December, the cost that is counted in lives, I think we should just take a few minutes and realise that we are doing the right thing today, regardless of the result. The debate is correct. And anyone speaking after me, if anyone does, should not criticise scrutiny for bringing this debate today. It's the right debate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. If there's any other member wish to speak on this proposition. Senator Farnham.
Thank you, sir, and I'm pleased to follow Deputy Morell and my political colleague and assistant minister. So I want to start just by referring to the loss of life, which is tragic under any circumstance. But I can't help but being concerned about the non-COVID related health issues, the loss of life, and the problems we could have coming down the line at us as we move through the pandemic. Thankfully, we hear today that in the UK, COVID is no longer the major or the top cause of death. Thankfully, heart disease has sadly overtaken that. But I think we all realise that whilst we've been focusing on the pandemic, there has been significant other loss of life. And I know because I speak to a number of medical professionals and GPs and people on the front line, and it has been quite harrowing, the stories they tell of other illness, and the fact that because people have been responding to the pandemic and have been scared to go out, they have not sought other medical treatment. We've seen that because because treatments and screenings for terminal illness are considerably down, sir, in a number of countries. I think Jersey has fared relatively well. We've kept that going as best we can, sir. But actually, people who have had concerns and aches and pains and lumps and bumps that they haven't got sorted, sir, sadly for many, it's too late. And that's one of the reasons why we have to push through this pandemic. As other members have said, you know, it's with us forever. We have to live with it. We have to adapt. I just want to speak a little bit about the economy, sir, as it is within our remit, or my remit. And this, and I will not castigate scrutiny for bringing this. I think it's a debate. It's a debate that's needs to be had, and it will probably need to be had again in the future. But if this were to be approved, sir, it would cause significant upheaval to islanders and visitors' travel plans, not just for now, sir, but it would impact many months ahead. We know that people like to plan in advance for travel, and so it's not something that would be a glitch for 2 or 3 weeks. It would affect bookings and trips for all sorts of reasons, including health and well-being, and the reuniting families for some time, as many would have to reschedule their travel arrangements. Of course, it causes more uncertainty for our already beleaguered transport partners. So we know that the airlines and the shipping companies have been very hard hit. They have assets waiting to be utilised, and they need certainty to do that. I think also there's an element of further reputational risk, because we've made the announcement weeks ago, and to cancel at the last minute, I think is not sensible given the risks. Having said, or the benefit risk. So having said that, it's important that we remain alert, and we remain, as we always have been, in a position to act swiftly should we need to, sir. And I can give that from my ministerial portfolio members absolute reassurance, and I'm sure I speak for not just fellow ministers but all members of the Assembly. If we're called to act quickly, we always will, and that option remains on the table. Islanders have flocked in their thousands, sir, to be vaccinated, over 70,000 jabs have been administered voluntarily. And I think that's because Irelanders, of course, they want to protect themselves to reduce the potential harm of COVID, but they also want to get back to normality. They understand that COVID is with us forever. They understand we must adapt, and they understand we have to live with it, sir. Life is full of risks, sir. COVID is another risk that we have to add to the list. Some members, sir, have said that we should perhaps wait a bit longer till our vaccination programme is complete. Well, our vaccination programme will never be complete. I think Deputy Guida referred to that. Of course, it's not complete. It's a rolling programme, just like the flu jab. So when all Islanders who choose to be, sir, have been vaccinated, it will be time for the boosters. So what do we do then? Do we come back in 3 or 4 months when everybody who wants to be is vaccinated and say, right, we've got to hold things up a bit further because we're back to the beginning again now. And those that were vaccinated at the end of last year, they've got to have their boosters. So we're going to hold back until they've had their boosters. We have to live with it, sir. And I am reassured by the advice of our scientific and technical and medical advisors, sir. And I speak regularly to them as a group and individually. And the consent is more than a consensus, sir. I think all of our advisors will tell you that the vaccination programme significantly reduces, up to 95% in most cases, and even more, 100% in some cases, reduce the risk of serious illness. Most of the people coming to visit us, sir, will be vaccinated, either with 1 and ultimately 2 jabs, sir. Most of us on Ireland will also be vaccinated, which significantly reduces the risk of serious illness. Of course, it doesn't eliminate it, but we know that, sir. But if we don't push forward through the pandemic, sir, then we are going to continue to suffer. Our general health and well-being, our economic health and well-being will continue to suffer, sir. And that is at the heart of our lives and the heart of our prosperity. So I think this debate is worth having. The proposition was well-meaning, sir. I think it is a little overcautious considering the progress we have made. Excuse me. And to that end, sir, I would also urge members not to support it, but thank the scrutiny panel for giving it their consideration and bringing it, sir. Thank you.
Any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and I call upon Deputy Ward to respond.
Thank you, sir. It's been a long old debate. In fact, sir, there have been 16 speakers. I numbered them as they went. I thought that might be useful. I'd like to thank everybody who spoke, and I would like to thank the panel for generating this debate as well with this proposition. I want to make one thing very clear about timings, because I think the criticism of scrutiny over this is absolutely unfounded. We were briefed 1 hour before the states members were on the 19th. The week later was a state sitting. We had to get the panel together. We had to decide what we wanted to do, gather information, and decide if we would bring a proposition. Turning it around in that time is actually quite miraculous. And I would like to thank the officers who worked so hard, even during their Easter break, to actually try to produce this. That's the reality of scrutiny. And I'd like to thank Deputy Morell for actually recognising the work of scrutiny and what actually happens and the reality of it. So I think I can deal with that timing issue, and I'm very pleased to do that. I would like to thank Senator Farnham, not simply for not going on for long, that's not fair, but simply for being dignified in his sort of rebuttal of the proposition. It's always nice to have a debate on a better level than that, because not everyone went there, but that's okay. So I'll go through as much as I can do and try and spare people as much as possible a long speech, but it is polite to respond to people when they do make a contribution to a debate. Deputy Renniff, I have a great deal of respect for the work that you've taken on as Health Minister, and I honestly say that taking on that role at the moment must be one of the difficult things on this island. And scrutiny may have been challenging, but that does not mean we are not supportive of the work that people do. And I want to publicly say that, including obviously all of the health staff. They do remarkable things, and all of the staff who have dealt with this. In terms of numbers arriving, I asked that question because we have received data. We have asked for data, and somebody mentioned that later on. Unfortunately, sir, it's not in a particularly usable form, and I will pick that up at the public hearing. Can I just say about timings? We requested a public hearing on the 25th of May. The first date that was available was the 23rd of April. So that's why the public hearing is where it is. And that's why we brought this proposition before the public hearing. It's a question of practicality. That's what happened. The Health Minister did use the phrase "not linked to any imminent threat." I'm not sure I do agree with the Health Minister on that one. I believe that COVID is an imminent threat still. And I would like to address a few members who spoke, Deputy Hewling mentioned it, a couple of other deputies, Deputy Farnham, Senator Farnham, sorry, I'm getting used to the removal of senators there too early. Senator Farnham mentioned the flu. COVID is not simply the flu. COVID is a very different virus. COVID has hit this world in a way which none of us could have expected. The science around COVID is new. It is new every day. It is new every week. Its behavior changes because of the nature of the virus itself. And viruses are remarkable things. They do remarkable things. And this one has taken hold. To downgrade it to this notion that it's a flu, I think it was Deputy Guida actually said it as well, I think underestimates, and we need to be very careful about that, and we should not be doing that. I think I dealt with most of the things from Deputy Renniff regards dates and so on. Constable Buchanan, I agree regards testing, I agree regards updating the vaccination. Do we rely on vaccination simply to open borders? Because I think...
Sorry to interrupt, Senator Farnham asked if you give way. He doesn't explain why he wants you to give way.
Yes, of course.
Might be for a point of clarification. Is it for a point of clarification, Senator?
Of course, sir, of course.
No, sir, I just think it's important to point out...
no, I'm sorry, Senator. I'm sorry, Senator. There is absolutely no provision for interrupting a speech other than on a point of clarification or a point of order. Sorry. Please carry on, Deputy.
Thank you, sir. It's okay, gave me a chance to get my note ready. Very good. I didn't have that awkward pause. It was filled by Senator Farnham. So I'm not questioning vaccines. I was a science teacher. I think science is a great thing, and I would urge everyone to get their vaccination. Without vaccination, I believe statistically a third of this room would have died before the age of 5. So without those things, they are very, very important. But we cannot put everything onto vaccination in terms of our travel and the spread of this virus, because there is a very important fact, which is a worldwide fact, that is until everyone is vaccinated, this virus will mutate and it will change. And because we have international travel, it will spread in those forms. And so we need to get out of this together. And the borders are one area of protection that we have. I want to reiterate something from what I said originally, which is that we are not talking about closing the borders. We have never said close the borders. And Deputy Gardner made a very important point, which she said the borders have not actually ever been closed. This is about how we open them further and the level of risk that we are willing to take when we do that. And I would like to, I just make, yes, that's a key point. I want to come back to that risk. I'd like to thank Deputy Gardner, who I knew was going to produce that type of speech, because she has the data, and I'm so pleased to be working with her on this in terms of doing that. And I thank you for putting all of that data regards stack minutes. This came from the fact that we finally got access to stack minutes. We looked at the patterns that had happened before, and what we are saying is, please let's be certain that it does not happen again. Now, there have been assurances today, and it will be up to each individual member to talk about those assurances. And can I thank Deputy Higgins for being so honest and saying, yeah, actually, it's good that we've got this debate. Even as a member of the panel, he's not certain himself. You know, that's absolutely fine, because as a scrutiny panel, that's what you do. You bring things forward as a collective group of different voices. And it shows that what we've done with scrutiny here is the right thing. He also made a few other points that I'll come back to. Deputy Martin, you talked about data science. First of all, the vaccination is not a miracle, it's science. In terms of evidence, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by evidence. If you want a scientific research paper, then no, you're not going to get that from scrutiny, because we do not have the time or the resources to do that. But I did make clear in my opening speech that what we're doing today is saying that one of the decisions made to change the classification levels was a government or political decision, and scrutiny's role is to review the decisions made by government, and that's what we are doing. And asking this assembly to put your cards on the table and say, do you agree with the levels that we're going to go with on Monday, or do you believe we should go back to those in July? That is equally a political or assembly decision to be made. That's what's in front of you today. In terms of risk aversion, I have to say, Deputy Martin, I am very risk averse. If my wife was listening to this, she would be laughing heartily, and so would my children. I never let them walk along that wall along the seafront. I always imagined that they would fall off and that would be the end of everything. I'm incredibly protective towards them. And you are protective towards things, people and that you care about and things that you love. I care enormously about Jersey, and I love living here. So if I'm overcautious about protecting it from in this way, then I make no apology for that. And that is absolutely the case. And I think many people feel that way. And it's that level of risk that I think does focus this debate. And I thank Deputy Martin for bringing that up. In terms of this notion of workers suffering, I'm sorry, that is a classic straw man argument. If we're talking about working people suffering, then perhaps we should be voting for a living wage. But anyway, it's not about exclusion of people. Indeed, there is perhaps some evidence that it was those who can afford to travel off island may have been part of the problem before. So let's not get down that line. And in terms of clarity and safety, that's what we're talking about today. And we're talking about leadership from the Assembly. This Assembly saying we will lead by saying we think this is the right thing to do, or we believe there should be a change. And I absolutely respect, and I have no problem with people in this Assembly voting against it if they do. I'm not going to hold anything against you, and neither will anyone in the Safer Travel panel. We bought this for this debate. We've had too good a few days and too much of a positive change for that to get in the way of anything. The Chief Minister, it's what he said, an interesting number, about 62% of the areas would shift to amber if we made this change. That does show that actually there are a significant number of areas that are on that cusp of being risky, of being a problem. And I would be very aware of that, and in the scheme of things, when you're balancing up your risks against benefits. And I think there is a primacy issue here of what are we trying to do here? We are talking about two different things, I think. We are talking about what level of risk we are willing to accept as an island that may spread the virus and bring another wave. If that happens, that affects our vaccination program. It affects the well-being of people on the island. It certainly does affect some parts of our population who haven't been vaccinated more than others. That's the risk we're talking about. If people have booked holidays, that is a different issue. And if the price of that is some isolation, then that is the price of that if the risk is agreed to be needed. And that's what we're asking the Assembly to do. That is the point that we're making here. Deputy Young is right about a debate in public and the lack of them. In terms of normality in the vaccination program, I agree. And that we do not want to put any risks to the vaccination program. I've had my first vaccination. I'm waiting for my second, and I'm very pleased to have done that. And I'm very thankful for the world of science who has developed that. And I will say that the vaccine I had was developed with public funding, by the way, not through greed. And Deputy Young, I think you were talking, I'm sorry, my notes got a bit garbled then, regards virus suppression and about impact if it occurs. And it's absolutely right. And it's a really important equation. If it's a large impact but low risk, the impact is still there. And when we risk assess, we do need to address that. Deputy Wickerton, I'm not entirely sure what to reply to you. I think you may just have had an issue with something Senator Mezek said, so perhaps you need to have a chat with them about that. Deputy Pamplin, you were correct, retimings and the public hearing dates. It was the first available. I've made that point. Deputy Guida, I've said to you before, I think the analogies you're making with flu are concerning to me. I think, yes, we will have to live with COVID, just as in some areas of the world they live with SARS, for example, which is why they've probably adapted better to the risk of COVID, because they're used to distancing and masks and those public health measures which need to be happening. I will also say, though, sir, that a number of other public health measures are being loosened at the same time as the borders opening, and that is a concern that I would have in terms of distancing, etc., etc. So what Deputy Hewlin regards the British and Irish Lions, I'm not entirely sure it is analogous, because unless he's suggesting that every tourist that comes we pay their hotel bills, I don't think that's going to happen, because that does little for the economy. So there is a slight difference there. I too enjoy watching rugby, and it'll be marvellous to see, but I think there are more important longer term issues for this island than just that event. We cannot build our economy upon popular sporting events, and I don't know, there needs to be much more to it than that. Deputy Morell, I thank you, because although you are not going to vote this way, you made a very good point, and you explained why this debate is needed, and I thank you for that. There are times at the end of a debate after 14 speakers that one does feel a little bit put upon. Although I don't take it personally, I blame the rest of the panel, obviously. But I respect your choice. And you're right, that, and it does worry me that people get angry. And there has been an anger, it seems, slight anger from government. And I would say, be careful with anger. It leads to fear, and that obviously leads to the dark side, as we all know. And we don't want that, do we? So we have a simple choice. The choice in front of members today is that you are happy to open the borders with the current classifications and the risk is worth taking, and you agree with the Chief Minister, which is that in changing that would have a smaller effect than we realise, and it will not make any difference whatsoever, and we're fine to go with that, and that level of risk you are happy with. Or the Safer Travel panel, and the word is, clue is in the word, Safer Travel, who believe that by changing it back to the levels that we had in July, we would lower that risk and we would be in a better position. That is the first initial issue that you are asked to address. And so I should have said at the beginning, we're very happy to take the proposition in 3 different votes in each part. I look at the Grefio as I do that so that it can start setting up the vote as they're scurrying away there. The second one regards regions is a very good question. We believed that from what we looked at before, the regions that we used were successful. And I think the argument regards smaller regions being more focused. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that. I don't think that is the case, but you have a choice there regards the larger regions or not. And the third issue that was, I've got to say, this is the wrong word, and I don't mean it that way to be confrontational. As I say, we've had too good a success over today, a really significant success today to create problems. But I did think the Chief Minister somewhat dismissed the last bit of this, and I'm sure he didn't. He'd be more polite than that. But I think that putting into this proposition about the talking to scrutiny in advance is very, very important. As I say to you, the briefing we had before States members was 1 hour before States members. That does not give us a lot of time to do anything different from States members and makes no priority to scrutiny. And I think that is very important, actually, particularly if we're going to come to the Assembly and criticise scrutiny for its timings. With that, so if I've left anybody out, I apologise. I don't think I have. So therefore, everyone's had a mention. I think if I have missed you out, I apologise. And with that, sir, there was a clarification from Deputy Martin.
Yes, Deputy Martin
Quite happy
asked for
to
a point
take
of
that.
clarification. Are you prepared to give way for that, Deputy?
Of course, sir.
Deputy Martin.
Yeah, sorry, it was just that Deputy Pamplin on the panel said he would hope you would cover it when you summed up. I think you're nearly there. About
Yes.
meeting with Stack, Deputy. Did you request it? Did you meet with them? Just out of interest. Thank you.
No, in the time span we had available, we certainly didn't have a time span to meet with Stack because we couldn't do that before the public hearing. Also, I would say that in terms of a meeting with Stack, I'm not sure how many scrutiny panels have had a formal meeting with Stack. I do know, for example, some of the minutes, it's very difficult to attend Stack, and they can be quite large gatherings at times, up to 30 people, I believe, at one Stack meeting from all sorts of different areas. So I'm not entirely sure how that would work. But I would say to you, Deputy, that no, we haven't formally met Stack in that way, because that's not something that I believe was possible. So I hope that it may not be the answer you want, but that's the answer we have there. I hope that helps.
And you've indicated that you're prepared to take these separately. It's entirely within your gift. It's your proposition. It's not legislation, so you can have it taken in any way you want.
Yeah, we'll take the three parts separately, please. That was what the panel has decided. So with that, sir, I would say thank you to everybody for the debate. I just say one thing to sum up just in one final moment. I think debates like this and us discussing and making clear where we're coming from improves clarity and transparency for the population of this island. And in dealing with COVID, what we need is to instill confidence in the decision-making process that is putting limitations on people's travel, however they are, large or small. And I think it's very important that we've done that today. And so I thank everybody for that. And I particularly thank the positive comments, whether they agree or not with this proposition. And I think we had a good discussion of this proposition today. And with that, so I ask for the appel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The appel is called for. The first vote is on part A of the proposition, and I ask the greffier to place a link. And I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The part A has been defeated, 9 votes pour, 34 votes contre, no abstentions noted in the link, and 3 further votes contre, or possibly only 2 in the chat. The pour en contre, yes.
Sorry, those voting for in the link, Senator Valois, Deputy Gardner, Deputy Doublé, Deputy Ward, Senator Moore, Deputy Young, Senator Mezek, Deputy Alves, and the Conotab of St Peter. Did you want the cont as well?
Yes, I think the cont was asked for as well.
In the chat, the Deputy of St Mary and Senator Fondre and the Conotab of St Helier. And in the link, the Conotab of Grouville, the Deputy of St Martin, the Conotab of St Clement, Senator Farnham, Deputy Ayer, Deputy Guida, the Conotab of St John, the Conotab of St Martin, Deputy Martin, Senator Le Fondre, Deputy Wickenden, the Conotab of St Juan, Senator Ferguson, Deputy Lehegara, Deputy of St Juan, Deputy Pamplin, Deputy Truscott, Senator Pallett, the Conotab of St Brelard, Deputy Higgins, Deputy Lewis, the Deputy of Grouville, Deputy Pinal, Senator Gorst, the Deputy of Trinity, Deputy of St Peter, the Conotab of St Lawrence, Deputy Ash, Deputy Morrell, the Conotab of St Mary, the Conotab of Trinity, Deputy Labby, Deputy Southern, and the Deputy of St John.
Very well. We now place paragraph B into the voting into the chat, please. A link for paragraph B vote. And the link is in the chat. I ask the Greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the Greffier to close the voting. Part B has been defeated, 12 votes pour, 29 votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 2 votes contre notified in the chat. Final paragraph is paragraph C, and when the Greffier is ready, I ask Greffier to post a voting link. The link is in the chat. I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the Greffier to close the voting. And that part of the proposition has been adopted. 24 votes pour, 17 votes contre, no abstention in the link, and a further 1 vote pour and 2 votes contre in the chat.
So may I just thank members for the debate and the vote. 33% is better than the Super League, so thank you.
Could we have the contre vote, please?
Contre vote, yes, definitely.
Those voting contre, Senator Le Fondre, Deputy Labby, Senator Farnham, Deputy Ayer, Senator Ferguson, Deputy Wickenden, Deputy Lewis, the Conotab of St Mary, Deputy Martin, Deputy Lehegara, Deputy Truscott, the Conotab of St Helier, Deputy of St Juan, the Deputy of Trinity, Deputy Pinel, Deputy Ash, and the Conotab of St Martin.
Very well. The next item is the Les Quennevets Park Flats Loan Scheme P19, lodged by the Minister for Housing. And for the purposes of the debate, the main respondent is the Chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel. I ask the Greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they're of opinion to approve, in accordance with Article 6.4 of the Public Finances Jersey Law 2019, a variation to the purpose and terms of the fund known as the 99-year Leaseholders Fund to enable monies from the fund to be lent to individual property owners for the repair of balconies on properties in blocks A to H, the Kennervay Park flats, under the terms set out in the report.
Minister.
Sir, I'm pleased to bring forward this proposition which asks the states to approve a variation to the purpose and terms of the 99-year Leaseholders Fund so that we can establish a loan scheme to assist property owners at Le Kennervay Park Flats, blocks A to H, with repairs to their balconies. In bringing forward the proposition, I'm grateful to Senator Ferguson for bringing this matter to our attention, and to the Treasury Minister for her support in developing the proposed loan scheme. This is an historic issue, but one which I believe the States has a moral obligation to assist the residents with. By way of background, the Le Kennervay Park flats were constructed on behalf of the former Housing Committee in 1963. They comprise 96 flats across 8 blocks, A to H, in a mixture of 99-year leasehold and flying freehold arrangements. During maintenance of the blocks, defects were discovered on a number of the flats' balconies, with further investigating showing that the defects stemmed from using precast concrete beams for the balcony structures. This type of concrete is much thinner than ordinary reinforced concrete, which makes it unsuitable for external use because of the risk of corrosion, and that the bolt fixings cannot sustain the force applied when someone leans against the balcony railings. Due to the time that has passed since the flats were built, it's not known why the wrong type of concrete was used in constructing the balconies, or who was responsible for this oversight. However, the fact remains that the defects ought to have been reasonably avoided. I am therefore proposing to establish a loan scheme to assist the owners with the cost of repairing the balconies from monies made available from the 99-year Leaseholders Fund. While the fund can already be used for the purpose of providing loans to repair the balconies on the 99-year leaseholder flats, the state's approval is required under the Public Finances Law to extend the use to fund the flying freehold flats. As members will see in the proposition, we have considered a number of options for providing the loans, and the 99-year Leaseholders Fund is the most appropriate option given the history of the flats, and that it contains sufficient funds to meet the anticipated demand for loans from residents. The terms of the proposed loan scheme are set out in the proposition. We've established a reasonable eligibility criteria to ensure that assistance is targeted towards residents who would not be able to access commercial borrowing. We have also ensured that the loan terms are fair and give those residents who choose to take a loan certainty regarding the repayment over a 10-year period. Members will finally see in the proposition that we have identified risks associated with the loans and how these will be mitigated. The Treasury will manage the loans on a day-to-day basis, and significant engagement has taken place with the residents via the managing agent, Brunel Management, to gauge the potential demand for the loans and to develop standard loan documentation so that we are ready to commence the scheme as soon as possible should the Assembly approve the proposition today. Members can see from the comments that myself and officers were thoroughly probed by the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel, and I thank them for their very comprehensive comments and for their approval. There was a question asked by me of them concerning the potential ambiguity over whether Brunel Management are expecting to recoup the costs of repairs over a 10-year period from flats which are tenanted, or whether the capital appreciation aspect will be taken into consideration. So in reply to that, I can tell you the following. Brunel is not the recipient of the loan. The loans are being offered to the 99-year leaseholders and the flying freehold owners who cannot afford the works without assistance. Its role is to collect the necessary amount from each owner and place it in the association bank account in order to place a building contract. If a property is let, it will be for the individual landlord to determine whether she requires a loan, and her application will be determined against the eligibility criteria, including income, savings and assets. It'll be for the landlord to determine whether she passes those costs on to the tenant, but that would need to be carried out legally within the terms of the lease and within the rent review process. Tenants of the flats will not be compensated for these costs. The repair works reflects the situation that could arise whenever a landlord needs to carry out repair and maintenance works, which again need to take place within the legal framework of the lease and the parties' respective obligations. So I recommend the proposition for the state's approval.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
I open the debate. Conatarbison Brillard.
Thank you, sir. My panel has received a presentation from the Minister on the proposition before us today, and we are so grateful for that. Our comment paper, which members will have received, outlines the various concerns we had and the responses received. It was brought to our attention, sir, by some ground floor residents, particularly who are concerned that they are having to pay something in the order of £10,000 towards something from which they get very little benefit. They seem to be unaware of their obligations to the Lekenve Park Flats common area. This may have been as a result of a lack of legal advice at the time of purchase, but perhaps the Minister could outline the process that took place and any mitigation measures that could be put in place to accommodate these particular residents. Likewise, sir, there were some original estates tenants who simply couldn't afford to purchase flying freeholds and have a mortgage on their lease. They had their normal annual service costs to pay and indeed struggled to do that. In summary, sir, I would ask the Minister to ensure that with the acceptance of this proposition, none of the residents will be disproportionately disadvantaged and suitable provision made for those that find themselves with financial difficulty as a result of the proposal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Conatarbs. Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. I should emphasise that the occupants of the flats, whether they be leasehold, flying freehold or tenanted, they don't want a grant. They are happy to repay the costs. We had several meetings with the tenants about all this, and they felt that they didn't want to just be having handouts. You know, they wanted a fair treatment. And this also mitigates the unfair doings that have been going on in the housing market with regard to these flats. Some of the freeholders have been frightened into selling at a lower value than should have been expected, you know, than if the balconies had been repaired, because they didn't think they were going to be able to afford to actually pay the £10,000 quoted. And this is where some of the residents approached me, and we had this very helpful response from the Treasury and the Housing Minister of the time. And we are all very grateful with the cooperation and understanding that we've had from the departments. So I thoroughly support this, and I hope that members will also support it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator. Deputy Ash.
Thank you, sir. I did actually prepare a reasonable response from a Treasury angle, sir, but Deputy Lavey, like the great thespian he is, has stolen most of my script. So I will stick with the advice very correctly given to us yesterday by the Treasury Minister herself to keep our speeches as brief as possible. Just to say, sir, that I'm particularly grateful to Senator Ferguson, who brought this matter to our attention. It has to now be said quite some time ago, sir, and whilst I don't like to lean on the oft-used excuse of COVID pandemic, that was the reason that it was slightly delayed, shall we say, but we seem now to have reached a satisfactory conclusion. I would like to thank the previous Housing Minister for his help in this issue, and particularly to thank the current Housing Minister, the Deputy Labby, who we seem to have a very good relationship with now. Thank you very much, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak? And I close the debate and call upon Deputy Labby to respond.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you to Senator Ferguson and Constable Jackson and Deputy Ash. As far as those without balconies are concerned, it's important to realise that, of course, if they're on the ground floor and don't have a balcony, their garden will sit under one, and the balconies are counted as communal areas and everybody's responsible, every owner's responsibility, like lobbies or lifts or stairs would be. The process has been exhaustive, and this has gone on for many years, trying to find a solution. It was the first emails I received on becoming Housing Minister were from Brunel Management saying, please, can you help us with this? It's gone on for so long, and the feedback we've had with finding this resolution has been very, very positive. And in fact, it was the first MD I signed, and I signed it within days of taking office because it seemed so eminently sensible. Is everybody okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry.
People are listening to you with care, and
I was trying to keep my microphone low because I understand that's the best way not to get echo, and so I just was worried in case you were trying to get in there. I mean, I think look, if we look at what's involved here, I mean, up to £600,000 we made available from the fund, which stands at 762. We don't think at the moment we will need to draw more than £450,000 from it, depending on the size of the flat, whether it's a one bed or more. The loans will be either £6,726 for the smaller flats or £14,164 for the larger flats. It's a 2% interest charge because legally we're not allowed not to charge interest, and so the repayments on the smaller ones, if they can take an interest-only scheme if they want to. That's £11.21 per month, but on a capital and interest repayment, that's £68.88 per month. So a great deal of care has gone into this, and a great deal of consultation. I maintain the proposition, sir, and ask for the appel.
As called for, I ask the greffier to place a vote into the chat. And I open the voting and ask members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then
difficulty accessing. Can I vote for?
Yeah, you've already cast your votes, Deputy. Well, do you want to cast your vote? Well, if it's gone dead, you'd like to vote for.
I voted, sir. Sorry.
You have voted.
It's a little out of breath. Sorry.
Right. Very well. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 37 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions in the link, and a further 2 votes pour registered in the chat. Very well. The next item is the Draft Public Holidays and Bank Holidays Amendment Number 3 Act 2002 2020 something. P21 lodged by the Chief Minister for the purpose of the debate. The main respondent will be the chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation of the proposition.
Draft Public Holidays and Bank Holidays Amendment number 3 Jersey Act 2000. The states make this act under Article 2 of the Public Holidays and Bank Holidays Jersey Law 1951.
Chief Minister.
Yes, thank you, sir. Yes, sir. I'm proposing this act today following the States Assembly's adoption of P9 2020, which was proposed by Deputy Tadier. If approved today, this act would establish a one-off public holiday on the 27th of September of this year to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the Code of 1771 and the Corn Rights. The intention of this decision is to ensure the Code of 1771, which forms an important part of our constitutional heritage, is remembered and reflected upon in contemporary Jersey. The Code enshrined for the first time the island's regulations, ordinances and laws, which were endorsed and also laid down some rules for the conduct of the States Assembly, the election of officers and the government of the island, and curtailed the powers of the Royal Court, sir. As I've said, the Code of 1771 represents a significant development in the island's constitutional history, arising from the actions of those involved in the Corn Riots of 1769. I hope the members will approve of the proposed act and join me in encouraging islanders to reflect upon the important history of our island and to mark the 250th anniversary of this significant milestone, sir, in our island's constitutional development. Thank you, sir.
Much. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Any member wish to speak on the proposition? No member wishes to speak on the proposition? No member wishes to speak on the proposition. Then I close the debate and put a voting link in the, ask the greffier to put a link into the vote.
Thank you, sir.
And I open the voting and ask members to vote in the normal way. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting.
So I think I missed that vote. I'm suddenly having trouble. I'd like to vote poor. Apologies.
Well, I've received Deputy Gardner's vote as a poor. Did you? Well, it is in mine, so not to worry, Deputy. Deputy Ward, did you vote before I close the voting?
Oh, yes, I have. I don't know, actually.
Well, the proposition has been adopted. 35 votes pour, 1 vote contre, no abstention in the link, and a further 2 votes pour registered in the chat.
Could we have the one contra, please, sir?
Yes, Deputy.
The Conataba of St Brelard voted contra.
Oh, the next item of public business is the draft amendment number 51 of the Standing Orders of the States of Jersey P23 lodged by the Privileges and Procedures Committee. For the purpose of the debate, the main respondent will be the Chief Minister, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft amendment number 51 of the Standing Orders of the States of Jersey. The states make the following amendment to the Standing Orders of the States of Jersey under Article 48 of the States of Jersey Law 2005.
Chief Minister, beg your pardon, Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. There is a great.
I'm afraid we can hardly hear you, Deputy. Could you?
Can you hear me now?
Not very much better.
Hold on a sec. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. There is a great deal of work, of good work across government departments, and our standards of service is generally high. but mistakes do happen and not everybody receives the service they should. The complaints panel's aim is to ensure that the public services are administered in accordance with accepted policies and procedures. The panel steps in when the complainant has exhausted internal complaints processes and the matter remains unsolved. In 2018, just before the election, this assembly voted to bring in a public sector ombudsman who would essentially take over the work of the complaints panel, which currently consists of 17 lay members, ranging from a QC to a shop owner. Progress on implementing this decision has been delayed, and this amendment to standing orders provides this assembly with some additional powers until the new system is in place, so that the outstanding work undertaken by the complaints panel is not simply ignored by ministers in the interim. In 2020, the panel processed 22 new complaints, although only 3 went as far as a hearing. After a hearing, a findings report is published, which includes recommendations for service improvement. Ministers are asked to provide a formal response to those findings, often within a 3-month timescale. The boards do not always uphold complaints, but they will always make recommendations to ensure lessons are learnt and improvements are made to the existing processes and procedures. However, there does remain a sense in certain departments that the complaints board's findings are not supportable unless they hold the department's position. Moreover, it appears at times that the responses are often a repetition of the arguments made within the hearings themselves, rather than a reflection on the recommendations and ways of improving services. Members have raised with us that they have had to resort to submitting questions to ministers separately in order to gain an insight into the rationale for their response. Following discussions with the chair and deputy chairs of the complaints panel, my committee believed that the process of responding to a board's findings should be strengthened. We are proposing that when ministers respond to a board's findings, rather than simply presenting this as a report, they should be required to make an official statement and face questions thereafter. Just as scrutiny is seen as a critical friend, so too should complaints board's recommendations be seen in a positive light, as a way of improving processes and procedures and ultimately the customer experience of islanders. It is worth noting that this process is actually part of the proposed structure for the new ombudsman, as it will allow there to be discussion of findings by this assembly. There may be some concerns expressed regarding the potential discussion of an individual's circumstances in this assembly. And whilst complaints hearings are mostly held in public and the complainant is named, where there is a sensitivity, then the complainant's details are anonymised, and in some cases, the hearing is conducted in private. We are not proposing that intimate details of a case be explored in a public forum, as that would be inappropriate. But it is important that any recommendations arising from a case in relation to improvements to service delivery or changes to policy are properly considered. It is that which should be the focus of the statement and question period, rather than an individual's particular personal circumstances. This process will give ministers the opportunity to explain their position, especially if they have chosen to reject the board's findings, and will also allow members to raise questions about the issue with the minister concerned. Making it mandatory for a response to be presented within 12 weeks of the report's publication will also ensure that ministers give adequate consideration to the recommendations made and demonstrate that the findings are not being ignored, which is both disrespectful to the complaints board, who have given up their time to review the case, but also hugely insulting to the complainant. Therefore, I urge members to adopt this simple standing order change to show support for the complaints panel, who do an exceptional job in lieu of an ombudsman, and demonstrate that this assembly considers it important that there is a robust oversight of the way services across the island are administrated. I propose the amendment.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Is it seconded?
Yes, sir.
Any member wish to speak on the amendment or proposition, I should say? Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to speak on this. I think it is much needed. Without giving anything away about an ongoing review in terms of addressing accountability, we've had some very interesting information, and this sort of change is much needed. I would suggest that often there are responses, but there aren't actions taken, and anything that puts into our constitution, that may be the wrong word, a need for a response and then accountability in this assembly, I think is very, very positive. I would say, sir, that this should not be an excuse for any more delays in the Public Service Ombudsman, and I would very much say we need to get on with that, and it needs to be in place as soon as possible with genuine powers and genuine influence, because that is much needed. Also, the Public Service Ombudsman is not in opposition, and again, I'm difficultly finding my words today, to the Complaints Board. It's not incongruent with their work, might be a better word. I think the two things work together, and they can actually enable each other to do the job very well. Discussions of findings should happen in this assembly, and as was suggested by Deputy Alves, and I would wholeheartedly support this proposition, any situation regards individuals can be managed and can be managed effectively, so that those important public discussions can take place, which increases transparency, which in turn increases accountability and gives much better opportunity for redress when things go wrong. So I would urge members to support this proposition. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Senator Ferguson.
Thank you, sir. I wonder if perhaps this ought to apply also to the SEB and not just the department that will be held to account. You know, I would just quote the Al-Witri case and others, of which over 20 years in the States I'm aware. In fact, I don't think Al-Witri is quite finished yet, is it? And this was 2012. And now it's 8 years, I think, if my arithmetic's right. You know, I have an idea that in the Al-Witri case, it took some years at a court case to get hold of the subject access documents. So I think this is a very light approach to making the state, particularly the health department, be responsible for their you know, how they conduct themselves. So I asked the PPC to give some thought to this, and perhaps Deputy Senator Valois' review panel over the next, you know, few years or months, perhaps. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I have to say, sir, I did raise this when this matter became before the Council of Ministers. I am a bit troubled about the situation regarding when we have review board complaints hearings where the complainant is asked to be treated anonymously in a private hearing of how this process is going to work. And I have to say, I am absolutely as frustrated by other members about how we got to the situation where there is no effective ombudsman arrangement, because I need to just air this, sir, that I did when I wasn't a States member. I approached a person who was aggrieved as a result of an ill health retirement decision, who had a chronic illness that went against them, and I took that case because all elected members who they represent that person were all ministers, and they said they were all conflicted and couldn't take it, but nonetheless I did so. And they ended up with a very, you know, enormous. One was faced with an army of lawyers arguing against you. I wasn't a States member at the time, and anyway, despite all that, there were two very, very strongly worded reports finding in favour of the person. Now, the minister made at the time, I think this was around 2015, 2016, 5 years ago, two made very dismissive reports and the case sits there. No action has been taken. That person doesn't have any redress. So what does that leave me? Yes, the ministers need to do a report to the states, but what I'm struggling with, sir, how could such a case come into a questioning session in a public session of the session without the details of the case being go to light? So I think you as the presiding officer would have a very, very difficult time finding a way through this. Now, the only immediate solution I can find is that there should be a possibility there, perhaps, is that if the complainant wishes to remain private, then this session in the States should also be private, sir. It's far from ideal. It really illustrates just how bad the situation is for the Complaints Board, why we need this ombudsman. I'm really frustrated why this is not happening. So I think this is well-meaning and well-intentioned, and I'm really pleased that PPC are addressing it, but I do have doubts about whether this actually is going to work in some of these cases, sir. Thank you.
Deputy Higgins.
Thank you, sir. And I fully support what PPC is bringing forward here. In the years that I've been in the States, I've helped an awful lot of people with problems they've had with States departments, and I might add the States Employment Board. And I'm absolutely appalled at the way the government departments treat the people of this island. Just in the last week, I've mentioned the health department and people trying to get their records. Basically, if someone has been injured, let's say through negligence on the part of whether it be surgeons, physiotherapists, or anyone within the hospital, and they try and get their records, they face an uphill task, as the people who are dealing with the children's service, which also came under health. In one case, even lawyers took 14 months to get records from the department, and that was through the intervention of the Law Officers Department, who created no end of problems. We have situations where when the records are obtained, they're getting legal advice to the lawyers, telling them not to tell their client what they've got. Now, how can the lawyer, without consulting the client, know whether the information that's been provided is accurate or not? The situation is unbelievable. And in fact, I've never, ever in my life suffered depression. But I'll tell you, a few weeks ago, I got close to it because the number of cases are outstanding where government departments are frustrating and, in my view, deliberately obstructing people getting information is appalling. And so the idea of departmental chairmen, ministers having to justify what their departments are doing under their leadership, I think is absolutely right. And I can't wait till we have a an ombudsman scheme, public services ombudsman scheme in this island, so we can hold them all to account more so. And it will actually free up states members who are being overloaded with cases. And it also applies not only to departments, the police, and I'd even criticise the Information Commissioner's Office for not pursuing some of the cases as fast as they should be when they know there's obstruction from the departments. And then they say, well, there's not much we can do. We can't even find them. So we have got problems in this area, and this is a step forward. And again, I'd just like to endorse what Senator Ferguson said with regard to the SEB. The SEB, as an employer, is appalling. We treat our employees really, really badly. And I am just amazed at some of the cases that have come over my desk. And the Al Witry one is one of the worst by far. And worse by far in the sense that they pursued a case where they didn't have a hope in hell of winning from the beginning. It's cost us a fortune in lawyers' fees, and it's probably going to cost us £7 million in damages if the top level of the award is given. Now, it's time we got a grip of this, and I think this is a positive step in the right direction. So thank you, sir.
Well, Deputy Southern.
Seems to me, seems to me, sir, as if it's very hot in here. So all of a sudden.
Yes, well, I was exercising myself as to whether it's parliamentary to refer to a hope in hell, but I haven't had a chance to look at that, so I've saved my hand.
Having used the phrase before, sir, there is precedent. I think you'll find.
Yes, Deputy.
Okay, I totally agree with the previous speaker that this is an excellent idea. It's got my wholehearted support. I've taken 3 or 4 cases to appeal panels in the past, and actually won one of them. But the reservations expressed by the previous speaker about anonymity or not is one that I came across very often. And the reality is most people are frightened of putting their name anywhere in the public domain. And often, rather than have problems with people who wish to remain anonymous, they would refrain from pursuing the complaint. So I don't think that is the ability to say no, you can do it anonymously if you wish is a good way forward. As to the SCP, I think they've got an accountability trail, surely, that comes through the Chief Minister, doesn't it? And he ought to be held accountable for the actions of his employment board if the case is brought and found to be wanting. But the overall principle that ministers are held to account and questioned by this chamber is an excellent one. The more opportunities we've got to hold ministers to account, the better our government will be. And it seems to me that this will be one way of improving what we do. The other question I have to ask is, and for how long are we going to have this system before the Ombudsman actually gets in place? What sort of length of time are we taking to have this particular regulations or these particular regulations in place? Is the question I would ask of the presenter.
Thank you very much, Deputy St Mary.
Thank you, sir. I should be very brief. I wish to speak as chair of the Legislation Advisory Panel, which is essentially responsible for bringing forward the public service ombudsman legislation. And whilst it has been beyond our own influence, I do apologise for the delay in this. I am assured that the legislation will be brought forward by the end of this year, and I echo the view of Deputy Ward that it is necessary on a number of counts, and once in, it will replicate the benefit which the Chair PPC now seeks to address. I congratulate her on bringing this forward as an interim step, and certainly, sir, I shall be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Wickenden.
Thank you, sir. I think this about this and transparency over the complaints board, and I agree that there's great work that's done within the complaints board. It's a good step forward. But I do have one concern, and that is about anonymity where it's required. I was wondering if the chair could let the Assembly and myself know what was thought of around anonymity. I just off the top of my head was thinking that there could be a provision in standing orders that the minister could make a request to the Assembly at the day for an in-camera questions. So you do your the minister would do their speech publicly, but if it was a case where there was a risk that maybe some members in the Assembly know what's going on, and there's a risk that information that was probably sensitive that we wouldn't want to be outlined in a public forum was to be released, that possibly that the minister could call in and say, could this one be in camera for these reasons? The Assembly could choose whether that happened or not at the time. I think that would be a sensible way forward to make sure that we have the safety. Of course, that's only for when it's for, like, for me, the Education Department. Of course, it's absolutely right that the Minister speaks openly, gets questioned in public, has to answer, has to be accountable for the decision that's made. But I do worry about anonymity of subjects in that manner. So maybe the chair could just respond. I was wondering whether this should have been a in principle discussion first rather than a immediate standing order change. But if the chair hadn't thought of that, I would ask the chair to think of that. But thank you, sir. I will be supporting it right now, but I would like to see something that would have a protection piece in place, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Labby.
Well, so we have to be careful day in, day out on the floor of the Assembly in terms of protecting anonymity and being careful not to name names when we shouldn't be doing so. But it is perfectly possible to have a conversation or a question and answer session about complaints about failures in procedure without naming any names at all. I mean, look, I've met with a complaints panel, and I think it is hugely regrettable that we have allowed morale to drop so low amongst a group of dedicated and diligent citizens giving of their time and their professional expertise to perform very difficult adjudications, and it takes an awful lot of their time. This is accountability in action, or at least it should be. Very often to the Complaints Board, it feels like accountability in inaction. And this is a small step to help them and elevate them and recognise their work, and to make sure ministers and departments are being held accountable when complaints have been upheld against them. I strongly support this measure.
Thank you very much. Deputies, any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Alves to respond.
Thank you, sir. So I think I'm going to start off with, I want to thank those members who have contributed to the debate, and I'm just going to start off with something to address some of Deputy Young's concerns and some of the concerns that other members have brought as well. We could bring changes to the administrative decisions law to bolster it, but we all know how long legislation takes to get through the Assembly, and obviously mindful that the Ombudsman is on the horizon. So we consider this is the best way forward as a quick fix, an interim response. So in Deputy Young's example, it would be policy which would be under discussion. Deputy Wickenden just raised about having in-camera debate, and yeah, we could look at requesting discussions in camera if the Assembly felt that was appropriate, of course, although part of the accountability is that it is public, and having discussions behind closed doors is not really good governance and gives the impression that there's something to hide. And like Deputy Labby just said as well, you know, ministers should be willing to discuss policy changes and improvements to processes in public. At the moment, the complaints panel does allow anonymity where appropriate, but many complainants actually want others to know what they've gone through, and there have been instances where others have come forward as a consequence of that case being publicised. Senator Ferguson and Deputy Young and Deputy Higgins as well also, and some other members also brought up about applying this to SEB. And I take on board those comments. Obviously, given the timing, and like we've mentioned, the Ombudsman is on the horizon. This should come under the remit of the Ombudsman. The particular case that the Senator brought up was actually dealt with by the Complaints Board as well. Deputy Higgins also brought up about subject access requests and I can say that I sympathise with him, because not only have I been through this with constituents, I've also been through this personally, and I'm 2 years on, I'm still waiting for some documents to be released. So I hope I've addressed everybody's queries there. I just want to finish off by saying that my committee is very grateful to the complaints panel members who give their time for free in order to support the principle of good public administration and ensure that islanders have some recourse when things go wrong in the absence of a public sector ombudsman. The current system is not perfect, but the panel are extremely dedicated, and until an ombudsman is in place, we believe they should be given as much support by this assembly to undertake their valuable work as possible. This simple amendment will ensure that findings reports are not ignored and that ministers are held to greater account should they decide not to implement any changes to policies or procedures recommended by a complaints board. Overall, it will provide for a more robust system and strengthen governance. So I urge members to approve the standing order change. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I ask the greffier to put a voting link into the chat. I open the voting and ask members to vote.
So I just wanted to point out when I opened the vote, sir, I was given a fourth option, the for, contra, abstain, or a box that said other.
Should we cancel that vote then?
Well, it won't make any difference.
Right. Well, if people could vote for or contra or abstain, and not whatever the fourth option may be, I think that would be that would probably assist.
I would have perhaps been tempted to use that box on another occasion, but not this one. Thank you.
Very well. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 39 votes for, no votes contra, no abstention in the link, and a further 2 votes for noted in the chat. Senator Moore, you have asked in the chat if I would consider making a ruling on a point in relation to Standing Order Schedule 3. Code of Conduct for Elected Members, which is the part that you wish to raise.
Thank you, sir. It's Article 9, cooperation with committees and panels, and it also transfers across into the Code of Practice for Engagement between scrutiny and the executive, sir. That would be Article 33. It's in regard to a previous vote this afternoon on P34, item C, which thankfully was adopted by the Assembly, but I would be grateful if you would consider your views as to those who voted against that part of the proposition, and whether they were in fact voting against the Code of Conduct, sir.
Well, the vote is what the vote is. It's open to members to vote in any direction at all, whether it is supportive of the Code of Conduct or not, and I don't think a member's free right to exercise a vote, even if it is not in accordance with the principles of the Code of Conduct, would of itself be a Code of Conduct issue. I haven't considered paragraph 9, Senator. I'm happy, if that's of assistance, to consider it overnight, but I'm not entirely sure what point you would like me to rule upon. Is it that was a vote against the Part C in that piece of legislation not in accordance with the code of conduct. Is that the point you would like to raise?
That's correct, sir. Yes, thank you. I'd be grateful if you would give it a little thought.
Yes, I'm happy to consider it overnight, but I'm not in a position to, I'm afraid, give a ruling on it now.
Quite understood. Thank you, sir.
Very well. Yes, the next item of public business is the States of Jersey Development Company appointment of non-executive director, P24, lodged by the Minister of Treasury and Resources. The main respondent to this will be the chair of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. I ask the Greffier to read the proposition.
The states are asked to decide whether they're of opinion, A, to appoint Carolyn Dwyer as an additional non-executive director of the States of Jersey Development Company Limited, SOJDC, for an initial period of 3 years, in accordance with the Memorandum and Articles of Association, to take effect from the delivery to the company of the notice referred to in paragraph B below, and B, to authorise the Greffier of the States, for and on behalf of the States, to deliver a notice to the SOJDC in accordance with Article 21B of the Memorandum and Articles of Association to give effect to such appointment.
Yes, Minister.
Thank you, sir. The States of Jersey Development Company was established through a proposition approved by this Assembly in October 2010. Today, I recommend to the Assembly a proposal with respect to SOJDC that will see a further appointment to the board, bringing even more diversity, skills, experience and knowledge to SOJDC. This Assembly, in adopting P70 2020 on the 14th of July 2020, approved updated memorandum.
Yes, I'm sorry. I could hear you perfectly well because, of course, I'm sitting here, but apparently no one not in the chamber can. So I have to ask you to start again, if that would be.
I'll start again. So my apologies.
Thank you.
So the States of Jersey Development Company was established through a proposition approved by this Assembly in October 2010. Today, I recommend to the Assembly a proposal with respect to SOJDC that will see a further appointment to the board, bringing even more diversity, skills, experience and knowledge to SOJDC. This Assembly, in adopting P70 2020 on the 14th of July 2020, approved updated Memorandum and Articles of Association of the company. These include the provision of additional non-executive director positions for the company to assist with not only succession planning, but the increase in workload of the company. So in the debate on P70 2020, I recall Deputy Doublé highlighting the need for ongoing diverse succession planning and recruitment within the state-owned entities. I hope this appointment demonstrates my commitment as delegated shareholder representative to ensuring that these boards continue to be diverse. By diverse, I do not only mean in respect of candidates and board members' gender. What I mean is an appropriately balanced board with the skills required to promote the long-term success of the company. I can advise members that SOJDC advertise this role on their website with local media and further afield, targeted to a diverse range of individuals. SOJDC were assisted in this process for this non-executive director by a leading external search agency, and the Jersey Appointments Commission were consulted at every stage. The board of SOJDC were keen to attract a particular skill set when appointing a new NED, focused around placemaking and regeneration, and a candidate who would bring with them an extensive track record, network, and knowledge of best practice, innovation and creativity in this space. The role itself attracted a significant amount of interest from candidates both on Jersey and from other locations. A small number of candidates, either based on Jersey or with connection to the island, were longlisted by the board for interview, which were conducted by our retained search consultants, Berwick Partners, who have a particular focus and expertise in this sector. However, following these interviews, the 6 candidates that were recommended to go forward for final interview as having the strongest and most relevant experience came for a number of locations off island. All shortlisted candidates, as it happens, were female. The proposal is to appoint Carolyn Dwyer as a non-executive director of the company. So members will see from the appendix accompanying the proposition that Ms. Dwyer has substantial experience, not only in the private sector, but also working with the government in the UK to deliver significant developments that were and remain beneficial to their residents. Most recently, Ms. Dwyer has been appointed as the Strategic Director for Development, Growth and Regeneration at the London Borough of Sutton. I very much believe that Ms. Dwyer will bring her wealth of experience and expertise to the board of the company, which will greatly assist in future developments in Jersey, including the proposals for the waterfront, which will be of great benefit to the island and the health and well-being of all islanders. So Ms. Dwyer is a high calibre candidate for the board of SOJDC, and she brings with her the requisite wealth of knowledge to contribute to the continued success of SOJDC. Sir, I make the proposition.
Is the proposition seconded?
It is, sir, yes.
Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. I want to speak on this, and I want to say right from the beginning that I will be voting against this appointment, not because of whether it's a high calibre member of staff or the process it's gone through, but because of the very nature of the appointment, which offers £22,000 for 15 days work. Pro rata for a 37-week year, that would be £271,000. Now, sir, these people who are employed to this may be important for the island, but are they more important than those people who are serving our food when we get out and help our mental health, which we've talked about so much in COVID debates, or pick our potatoes, the glorious Jersey Royal that gives such an identity to the island? Because at the same time, this assembly will rubber stamp £22,000 for 15 days work at the same sitting that they voted against increasing a living minimum wage to just £10 per hour. And I, sir, for one, will not be part of that hypocrisy. So I cannot accept these high value appointments for short periods of time for these arm's length organisations continuing and extending. And I know that we'll get from those who support comments about how valuable these people are. But however, sir, we need to think very carefully before we make these huge appointments and then balance it with valuing all of our workforce, all of those people who go out to work and try and make the ends meet with a family. And at the same time that we vote against that living wage, there is absolutely no way that I will vote for this appointment. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy Young.
Thank you, sir. I think it's known that for a long time I've had concerns about the role of the SOJDC, in that it had, and here we have, there's no question, we have an outstandingly well qualified and able candidate, and it absolutely, I can see how it ticks all the boxes about diversity and succession planning. But where I'm troubled is the last thing we need is an independent vision coming from comment on SOJDC. We've already got major problems about integrating our arm's length companies into our government planning. And we don't, so here we have an expert in placemaking, which I'm absolutely sure, brilliant skills. And obviously, but of a person of that nature, it's going to bring a very different view about, for example, creating world-class international centres and so on. What we need, and of course, we now have the South West St Helier development framework. So it's not a waterfront development framework anymore. In fact, if this was a role where we were bringing somebody in to help us with the vision of the whole of St Helier, I think my reservations would be dealt with, or even South West St Helier. But just to focus on one little area, which I think my concern is that placemaking has to look at the broad picture, and you need an integrated process there. And of course, I find it quite difficult that you can have that placemaking when you don't have local connection. So none of these are negative points. They all point to the need, how we really need to rethink and try and look as we go through in how we're going to tackle urban regeneration and making our town better, and implementing, I hope, if the states approve the island plan draft, the vision in there how we can translate that. I mean, we only recently we had decisions, we made decisions. We want affordable housing. There's, absolutely right. We've seen, issues where in the past we've had buy-to-lets generating profits and so on. That's, I'm afraid, and yet at the same time, we've got Andean struggling for sites, and we desperately need to join this up. Regeneration, and I've discussed with the DG of IHE, and I really believe I think there's some links in there, but that we need to follow up and do. So is this the right appointment? I honestly, I'm really not convinced at the moment, and I've abstained before. I'm not really sure whether I'm going to abstain again or vote against, because I don't want anything to go against this person, because they're obviously a standing candidate. But it's really important that when we fill these top roles, we have the right approach, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Deputy Hegarel has seeking to propose the adjournment in the chat. I have 5 members already registering an interest in speaking, and obviously there are at least another 4 matters of some substance for the Assembly to deal with on this order paper. You propose the adjournment, Deputy?
Yes, I do, sir. We're obviously scheduled to come in tomorrow. We do have the fisheries, and I think there probably will be more than the 4 already listed, sir. Thank you.
Very well. Unless any member indicates to the contrary, I propose to accept that as a proposition and seconded on a standing vote in the normal way.
And that's right.
Very well. The Assembly stands adjourned and will reconvene at 9:30 tomorrow morning.